It's the academy entrance exam. All the students are placed in a special subspace where they have to fight each other to the death, without risking their real lives. Everyone brings their best weapons and gear to improve their chances. Yet there's one guy holding nothing but a short kitchen knife. The other students are sure he's just a poor, pathetic loser who can't afford proper weapons. But when the exam starts, this guy shows them he's the real deal. With his knife, Gyama moves so fast it feels like time freezes. When he meets his first opponent, a single strike cuts through armor like it's butter. The guy who thought he was invincible in his suit can only scream in pain. He loses his arm in an instant. Another guy tries to smash Gyama from behind, but he dodges easily and cuts him down as well. The other students can't even understand what's happening. Neither can the teachers, who are shocked to the core. They've never seen anything like this before. When this guy holds a sashimi knife, he gains power equal to a god. So why is he so strong? In his past life, Gyama was an ordinary sashimi chef. He worked with knives his entire life, but one day, he was sucked into the magical world of a game he used to play. When he wakes up, he instantly receives a notification that he's been blessed by the Blade God. This blessing makes him unbelievably strong when he wields weapons shorter than 12 inches long. Basically, he has to use sashimi knives in this life too. So he buys the cheapest knives he can afford and goes to enter Hawakan Academy. When he arrives, the teacher inspecting equipment isn't impressed at all with what Gyama brings to the table. Gyama's choice of equipment are cheap, discount knives from Daiso, and even though he genuinely wants to use these as his equipment, it doesn't look convincing to the inspector. On the day of the entrance ceremony weapons screening, every year, there are kids who want to make a name for themselves by playing pranks such as these. The teacher thinks that this is the same thing happening yet again, and he decides to use this as an opportunity to establish his authority from the start. The teacher slams his hand on the table and asks Gyama if he thinks that this academy is some kind of joke. There's no way he is seriously bringing kitchen knives as his equipment for the class placement test. Gyama confirms that it may look ridiculous, but this really is his equipment. The instructor tries to double down on his disciplinary attitude, but Gyama calmly reminds him that he is a special admission student from an ordinary family. Just the tuition alone is a huge burden on his parents, so how is he expected to provide expensive equipment? The color of the name tag on Gyama's jacket proves that he really is a special admissions student, and the instructor himself knows that these students are not upper class, so they don't have the privileges of other students. The instructor is taken aback by the fact that someone who is affiliated with an institution that is meant to have a level playing field is forced to do these kinds of things as a deeply devoted student. But Gyama has one last thing to say. The same teachings that his master made him take to heart. He believes that blaming the equipment for poor performance is something that only amateurs do. An expert doesn't blame their equipment, and Gyama as a pubescent teen already carries this fact in his heart. It's almost as if he has reached the pinnacle of his field. His words of wisdom remind the instructor of someone else who also has a similar unyielding spirit. Since Gyama has clearly made his point clear, the instructor allows him to bring his equipment into the school. As Gyama packs up his tools to head into the school grounds, he can overhear the other students and their obvious dislike of him. The privileged clearly have a special distaste for special admissions students, but the instructor doesn't want to hear any of that from the kids. He yells at the remaining students in line to shut up and get a move on, while Gyama stealthily sneaks away. This entire experience is surely going to give him PTSD. He just entered the school, and he's already tired of the whole experience. He knew that the prejudice against him would happen, but experiencing it firsthand still feels awful. At least the equipment evaluation is done and he somehow made it through the entrance ceremony. The only thing left is the class placement test, but he's already exhausted. He has come this far though, and now he's officially in the school that he will be attending for the next 3 years. Being here in person is completely different than what he saw on his screen back in his previous life. It's not an exaggeration to say that the city is about the size of a small city. The fact that he is going to study at a school attended by the upper-class people is still a shock to him, despite how exhausting the whole experience has been. Thinking back to when he was in the district and he had to drop out of school due to his family's circumstances, Gyama can hardly believe that this is happening. An announcement comes over the speakers informing the students that the placement test is about to start and new students need to assemble at the training hall by 3 p.m. This was way sooner than he expected, but Gyama can't let himself be surprised. This placement test is a very important milestone for the rest of his student career in the school. He pulls out one of the knives from his bag, determined to pass the test, no matter what. Now that he's holding the covered blade though, he realizes that he hasn't used a knife even once since he came to this new world. His old teacher used to tell him that he must never let go of his sword. He should sleep with it in his hand if he has to. It's been 20 years since he started living by the sword, and his teacher taught him these crazy habits, so a year of rest couldn't possibly have dulled his skills. He gives the blade a few tests, checking the handle and the feel of the sharp blade, and to his surprise, it's not bad at all. Now all that's left is to try out the blade himself, and he uncovers it so he can check its worth by cutting a leaf. As soon as the blade is completely uncovered, a jolt of electricity runs through his body, and a status screen pops up, informing him that he has met the equipment conditions, and the sword god blessing will activate as a result. However, his physical body is too low to receive the blessing of the sword god, and the level of his equipment is also too low, meaning that suppression has to be used to synchronize the equipment with the user. Giamma is surprised that only drawing the blade is enough to activate the blessing, but before he can even think about it, the system prays that the blessings of the gods be with him, and then activates the first level of the skill. This immediately fills his body with sharp and nearly unbearable pain. He screams out in agony as the pain floods through his body, and he starts to think that he might die at this rate. The world shatters around him, and the pain stops momentarily, revealing a large empty space with a bright red light in the center. Giamma stares at the empty space in shock, and the freezing feeling causes him to drop his blade, ending the blessing and causing the world to return to normal. The moment he lets go of the sword, the world returns to normal and he comes back, but that doesn't mean that the pain stops. The pain was so unbearable that it seemed like the entire world was being torn apart. It must be some kind of backlash from using the power without having the strength to withstand it. When he tested out the painless blessing, it only caused him mild muscle soreness. If every activation is going to feel like this, then he can't use this blessing. Another announcement comes over the intercom, calling for all new students to assemble at the training hall immediately. He stares down at the knife that felt like it almost ended his life. He may not be able to wield it, but surely he can pick up the knife. There's no way he can just leave a sashimi knife laying on the ground. And besides, maybe it only hurt because it was the first time he activated the blessing. Bending down to pick up the blade proves that it really wasn't just the first time, as he let out a scream of pain that filled the campus. He arrives at the training hall, which is more like a gladiator's arena than a school hall. All the new students gather in the center of the arena and chat among themselves as they wait for the event to start. The staff also stay at the top part of the arena and discuss amongst themselves. Their chatter stops abruptly as they notice someone special among them in the audience. It's the Lord Sword Emperor, one of the 7-star heroes, Siegfried von Nibelung. He is the direct descendant of Aaron Nibelung, who was the apprentice of the legendary hero Balor Håkon. He's so powerful that he has come to be known as the strongest human, and others can't help but stare at him as he unshakingly watches over the students in the arena. Siegfried can't help but sigh as the noblemen walk away, and someone else comes up beside him. It's another one of the 7-star heroes, Medea Poison, and according to her, it's been half a century since they last saw each other. She's the head of the academy, and she's also turning 70 soon, yet she maintains a beautiful and youthful look and dresses as if she's still in her 20s. This is all thanks to her blessing, and she can even make Siegfried look 10 years younger, but the man refuses. The two exchange small talk and light teasing as they reminisce on how long it's been that they've known each other, though it's mostly just Medea very successfully pissing off Siegfried. However, despite how annoying she's trying to be, she still mentions that it's odd for Siegfried to come to these kinds of events. For the longest time, the Sword Emperor has despised mixing with people of the elitist mindset. This time, it's probably because his granddaughter is one of the students among the crowd today. Siegfried doesn't reject that assumption as the games prepare to start. Meanwhile, in the arena itself, Giamma is as isolated as he can possibly be among a crowd of rainbow-haired students. It looks like he is the only one with black hair in this whole place, and to make things worse, he is also a special admissions student. That only makes him even more of an outcast among the elites. This exact scenario must be what they call a humble origin. Among all the new students though, even as everyone has their own unique appearances, there's one person that catches everyone's attention. As she walks past the crowd of people around her, her wavy blue hair causes everyone to stop and stare. Giamma already knew that she would be a student here, and he doesn't have the same shocked expression that the other students do. The girl they are also hypnotized by is Abel von Nibelung, the granddaughter of the Sword Emperor, and the game's main heroine. She is also the reason why he spent so much money on the game. Moving on from the beautiful woman captivating the crowd, the more important thing to talk about are the details of the placement test. The test will take place in subspace, which is an area that was first created by the legendary hero, Balor Håkon, along with the establishment of the academy. It's an alternate space from reality where fighters will experience all the damage and pain inflicted to them there, but the damage will not affect them in reality. Since there is no risk of harming anyone in real life, gruesome things, including murder, can be overlooked there. This particular test is going to be a subspace battle royale where the new students will be divided into groups of 10 and put into a survivor game. The ranks of each group will be based on who can survive the longest. There are also no restrictions on armament, which means students can do whatever they want during their period in the test. No restrictions on armament also means that the elites can have it all, and they have an advantage in this test. That may be the case, but the academy is funded primarily by the nobility's money. This is as much of a compromise as they can make. Medea had to go through a lot of trouble to introduce the special admission system that can help the commoners enter the university. The students don't care about that at all though, and they are still blindly following after a disinterested Abel von Nibelung, while Guillaume watches them all from a distance. It doesn't take a genius to figure out why they are following her so diligently though. She's incredibly pretty, and he already thought that when he could only see her in 2D, but now, seeing her in the flesh, she's even more breathtaking. If he didn't know how the story of this world was going to play out, he would have tried to strike up a conversation with her as well. But he knows something that those poor guys don't. Abel von Nibelung is a character of the Miracle's Blessing M, and more specifically, she's one of the protagonists of the game, and she's directly connected to the main character. In the end, beautiful people always have someone they match with, and he knows that for a special admission student like him, he is not suited to be in this race with the rest of the nobles. For now, he'd rather avoid getting involved and ending up with a noisy school life. Since he was essentially forced into this school, he has some rules that he plans to stick with. His goal is to live a safe, ordinary, and secure life, and his self-imposed motto for the future is to complete his studies smoothly and obtain a regular job. Being a hero is definitely not on the agenda for him, especially when just pulling out a knife sends his whole body into shock. He's still trembling right now, even though so much time has passed since he accidentally activated his blessing. The rest of the important people in this game can protect the world. RMC just wants a nice quiet life with a comfortable job. The placement test begins and a voice calls over the intercom to announce the rules. This year's test is a battle royale and the new students will be split into teams of 10. The top ranked will be placed in the Star class. Ranks 2 and 3 will be in Dragon class. Rank 4 to 7 will be in Wolf class. And ranks 8 to 10 will be in the Ordinary class. Based on the results, each student will be accurately assigned to different classes, and the scores will be automatically calculated. There is also no time limit to this challenge, which makes this just like a game. Giama's goal is the same, and he wants to finish it quickly without drawing any attention to himself as an ordinary student. With the rules properly explained, the test starts, and a spatial occurrence device is activated, sending the students to their appropriate areas. If Giama can help it, he wants to even completely avoid drawing any weapons if possible. The exams go as expected, and after a while, groups start appearing after completing their sessions. The positions of each group gets announced one by one, as the two administrators make small talk over the sidelines. Medea thinks that this batch of students is particularly remarkable. It includes Siegfried's granddaughter, as well as descendants of other notable figures. It's pretty clear that the results of this game have already been predetermined. From the results that she can already see among the groups that have completed their games, some have finished with amazingly fast times. His granddaughter Abel finished with a new record pace while using a C-class weapon. She only used it to make sure that the results are fair, and she's not beating people with an S-class weapon. Her time is impressive, but it's still not as good as Siegfried's record back in his day. Till now, it still stands among the top 10 in the Academy's history. Siegfried doesn't hide his pride in his granddaughter, and such results are only natural for a descendant of Nibelung. By now, a good number of groups have finished their sessions, and Siegfried decides that it's time for him to leave. There's only one batch left, and he doesn't feel like waiting to see who will win. He gets up and bids Medea farewell as he takes his leave, but then suddenly, a sharp sensation passes through the area that causes everyone in the arena to pause. Medea and Siegfried feel something powerful in the air, and the once calm vibe between them is thrown into a panic as they try to figure out what is going on. Siegfried hasn't felt such a powerful feeling in a long time, and it causes him to freeze in place. The sky above them breaks as the final group finishes their test, and two people fall from the sky, unconscious. Another bright light shines in the sky, and someone else falls to the ground last, along with a single sharp blade that pierces into the ground right in front of the unconscious student. Siegfried watches this student in silence as Medea calls for a medical team to check the vital signs of the cadets who just arrived. This all started earlier during one of the group's sessions while the students were fighting among themselves. Well, they should have been fighting among themselves, but it's more accurate to say that a pair of brothers were beating the crap out of everyone else. Because of these two boys, the outcome of this match had pretty much already been decided. It seems like instead of participating in a battle royale between students, Jiyama found himself in the middle of a death match. He knows these two boys well as the evil twins, Mao Jun and Shun Mao, two men with natural-born talent and a boundless love of brutal violence. These two have been deliberately playing with the weaker students for nearly 30 minutes, just enjoying the act of tearing other people apart. However, it seems like Jiyama looks so weak to them that they didn't even notice him. Eventually, all the people they've been playing with eventually die, leaving the two boys bored and looking for their next target. They tally up who they caught among themselves, and all that's left is a single girl in the back, nervously shivering while they point at her. It's clear that they have horrible thoughts about this girl, and Jiyama can't just stay quiet anymore. He has been watching the girl quietly in the corner since earlier, and it looks like they are already panicking and don't have the will to fight. Shunmao walks towards the girl who doesn't have any intention of running away, and tells her that she perfectly suits his taste. Even Mao Jun can't help admitting that his brother is definitely a pervert, but that doesn't mean he's going to stop his younger sibling. That's the last straw as Jiyama yells from the back of the arena, catching the two boys' attention. He stepped in without even noticing what he was about to do, and now, the two boys who didn't even notice before, have him right in their sights. They notice the color of his name tag, identifying him as a special admission student, meaning that he's even less worthy to be in their sights. The two boys decide to end him quickly so they can go back to taking care of the pretty girl behind them. Jiyama wonders what he should do now that he's facing them both head-on. He could use the blessing of the void to cancel out his pain for 30 seconds, but they have been desecrating corpses for 30 minutes. There's no way such a short amount of time will make any difference for him. There's only one choice for him in this situation, and the answer lies in his bag of sashimi knives. But if he wields a blade, then the blessing will definitely manifest, causing unimaginable pain again. He wanted to live a safe, ordinary, and quiet life, but not even half a day has gone by, and he's already in this kind of situation. He reaches into his bag and pulls out one of the knives, causing both brothers to burst out in laughter, while the girl continues to watch the situation play out without a word. Shun Mao decides not to waste any more time on this lowly guy and launches towards him to take our MC out. This isn't a situation where Jiyama can be picky, but he has a plan. He can use his painless blessing for 30 seconds to cancel out the pain from the sword god blessing. All he has to do is hold on for long enough to outpace these guys. He activates his painless blessing right before drawing the sashimi knife from its casing, and once again, the blessing of the sword god activates right as Shun Mao descends on him with a wicked smile. There's only one way for Jiyama to survive this. If he can't cut through this situation, he will die. But there is no way a sashimi knife can cut through that massive body. It's not a fish, it's a full human being. In moments like this, he remembers his teacher who was once a gangster. One day, he asked his teacher why gangsters always use sashimi knives in movies. But even his teacher said that those kinds of things can only happen in movies. Even if a god comes, it's not possible. The blessing states that if he wills it, then he can cut it. And with that confidence in mind, he thrusts his knife towards the large man jumping towards him, and in an instant, Shun Mao is sliced in half. Another time, Chef Kim asked his teacher why gangsters eat sashimi, and that got a knife thrown at him, barely missing his face. That's one of the many instances where his boss proved that he was an ex-gangster. After his years on the dark side of the streets, he hacked off one of his wrists as atonement. Then he opened up a sushi restaurant to make people happy with his knife skills. The two of them talked about how criminals are constantly flashing sashimi knives in movies, and Chef Kim once asked his mentor if that is how it works in real life. When stabbing someone with a wide kitchen knife, their skin contracts, but it won't be able to come out. However, sashimi knives are thin and allow someone to stab a body several times. However, his teacher also said that he can't use that same knife to slash at a human the way you would slash at a piece of fish. His teacher even said that if a god comes down, it still wouldn't be possible. While the arm flying off from Shun Mao is proof that slashing is indeed possible, the three other students are all shocked at the sudden change in power as Jiyama stands with his knife ready for another attack. Shun Mao holds his bleeding arm and yells in pain as Jiyama walks closer. Left with no other escape, Shun Mao tries to run away while begging Mao Jun to help him before he dies. Before he can get much further with his whining, Jiyama cuts him off with a quick slash of his blade, taking the student's head off immediately. His brother screams as Shun Mao's severed head drops in front of him. He forces his brain to remember that this is void space, and that means Shun isn't actually dead. But that aside, this random gloomy guy slashed his brother with nothing but a simple kitchen knife. Mao Jun now has to fight this beast by himself, but someone who clumsily runs around with a knife definitely doesn't have any experience fighting. Even with that, he has to be careful of the knife. Shun Mao's loss has to be because of his irresponsibility. Now he, as the remaining brother, has to pick up the slack of his defeated sibling. He picks up the severed arm of his brother and takes the power gauntlet for himself. The weapon displays its true might when it's used with two hands. One hand gives a blessing of resolution, which increases his defense, and the other gives a blessing of intervention, which increases his jumping ability by 200%. On top of that, using the two together also gives increased fist power. Manifesting these three benefits together gives true power that even the gods cannot imagine. Mao Jun has no idea where Jiyama got such a powerful weapon, but even S-rank weapons cannot pierce his defense. Meanwhile, Jiyama isn't even paying attention to the brute, and he's keeping track of how many seconds he has left before his blessing ends. Mao Jun takes the opportunity to rush in for a sucker punch while Jiyama is distracted, and everything that happens next occurs in an instant. Mao Jun lays on the ground covered in his own blood and barely alive, while Jiyama continues to count down. Once the countdown ends, the effect of the blessing of immunity ends as well, and all the pain from the blessing of the sword god hits him at once. He screams out in pain, still holding the knife as Mao Jun's consciousness fades. Time passes, and eventually, Jiyama wakes up to a white room that's probably some sort of clinic or hospital. He shakily tries to get up, and the sound of him moving alerts someone outside the door who announces that he has woken up. Immediately, two people walk into the room and stand before him. These two faces are people he has never met, but he somehow already knows. 50 years ago, the people who destroyed the Demon Lord's 6th Legion commander were the 7-star heroes, and these two people are one of those heroes. The first is the strongest of humanity, Siegfried, and the one who speaks to him first is the Academy's director, Medea Poison. Jiyama can't help but wonder why these two powerful people are here together to see him. They start by asking his name and he tells them. Then Siegfried gets straight to the point and asks Jiyama what exactly on earth he did. During his fight, the two stars felt a sensation at the time, and although the sensation wasn't Jiyama's, it was still obviously caused by him. Siegfried doesn't even try to hide his animosity, and his hand rests anxiously on his sword as the two administrators talk to Jiyama. There's definitely nothing good about being targeted by the monster that's known as the strongest of humanity. Jiyama decides to first apologize, and tells them that even though it was in void space, it's clear that his actions went too far, and he's ready to accept any punishment without complaint. The two men stare each other down, and Medea is forced to come in between them before it becomes a fight of some sort. She tells Siegfried to not scare the kid so badly, and then gets close to Jiyama and assures the student that Siegfried cleaned his clogged meridians while he was unconscious. The mood shifts as Siegfried yells at Medea for telling Jiyama something so confidential. Jiyama can't believe that the sword master would do something like that for him, but now that he thinks about it, his body is definitely a lot lighter, and it feels like he's moist and heavy like a feather saturated in water. Although Jiyama was unconscious, they reviewed the video of what happened with the staff, and they concluded that he did what he did to defend a female student who was in trouble. Medea can't hide her drooling over the fact that Jiyama is exactly the handsome prince she has been dreaming of. Siegfried has to pull the school administrator back before she gets into some illegal territory. The main thing Medea is trying to say is that she won't give him any grief over his actions during the test, and the twins didn't have the best reputation either. They were admitted after getting the favor of the Academy's elders from the Mao family. After what Jiyama did to them in the test, the two of them have decided to withdraw from the school. That's a relief for him since he won't have to share the same school with those two brutes. That isn't all that the two administrators are here to tell him though. The main thing they came to do is congratulate him for being the top scorer in the whole school. It looks like his peaceful and safe life has officially become impossible. After the meeting with Jiyama, the two administrators regroup in Medea's office. The school administrator has been the head of the academy for over 2 decades, but this is the first time something like Jiyama's situation has occurred. A student earns the top spot among all the new candidates, and then rejects the offer to join the highest class in the school, the star class. They try to ask him to reconsider, since being in the star class has a lot of privileges. And it's not like this was a fluke either. The top student is determined based on the subspace's direct results. Even though they try to make him rethink his decision, Giamma still doesn't want it. Medea asks Siegfried if he's upset that Giamma took the rank instead of his daughter. After all, he saw the video too, and he should have seen how much potential he has. Siegfried doesn't agree though, and he sees this as nothing more than an immature child challenging the grading performed by the subspace. The subspace has the will of the founding hero, and since the subspace recognizes him, then the academy itself has also chosen him as the top pupil, and that won't change. Siegfried also has his own personal thoughts, and he sees Giamma as someone completely strange. If his skills were outstanding or his physical abilities were great, or even if he had a little bit of experience, but Siegfried could tell that he had none of that. And yet, as Siegfried saw himself in the video, there was a great essence of skill in how Giamma moved, and it's been something that he has been pursuing for his whole life. It represents the ultimate form of swordsmanship. When he was unblocking Giamma's acupoints, he sensed how feeble his body was because he had not yet received any physical training. It also appears that something was stored that even the strongest human cannot comprehend, and because of that, he's feeling incredibly competitive to someone that is the same age as his granddaughter. Medea is more focused on the fact that he's quite attractive to her, and she's still smitten by the fact that he revealed his skills to save a woman in danger. If she were just 10 years younger, she would go after him for sure. She asks Siegfried what's on his mind that has him so quiet. He doesn't answer and eventually asks her what she thinks that students call people like her. The school administrator is interested and tells Siegfried to tell her what college students would call her. The answer is definitely not what she wants to hear from him, and she ends up exploding. Meanwhile, Giamma goes to attend his first class in his new school career. He rejected going to the star class, so the best they could downgrade him to was wolf class. Any lower, and the elders would have thrown a tantrum. He originally wanted to be in tiger class, but Medea practically begged him to go to wolf class in exchange for keeping it secret that he is the top student in the school. Giamma originally wanted to complete his studies securely in a lower class, rather than battling and straining in a higher level class. Wolf class is a bit high level, but it's still within the range of what he would have expected. Giamma pushes through the large doors and enters his new classroom, and for a moment, all the students in the class look at him with mild curiosity. Then they notice that he is a special admissions student, and just like that, no one could care less about him. Giamma doesn't mind being ignored by them. The fact that they are ignoring him means that Medea kept her part of the deal and hid the fact that he is the top student. Now all he has to do is live the tranquil life that he has always dreamed of. He settles down on his desk as a familiar student walks towards him nervously. She shakily thanks him for helping her previously, but Giamma has no idea who this is. Then she clarifies that she's the girl that he saved during the test. Giamma brushes her off and tells her that she doesn't need to thank him. After all, anyone else in a similar situation would have done the same thing. It may look like he ended up saving her, but he actually did it to save himself. Accepting her gratitude would make him feel like a hypocrite. Giamma changes the topic by instead introducing himself. The girl follows suit and reveals that her name is Chloe. It's a pretty interesting coincidence that they ended up being in the same class. Now that the introductions are done, Giamma tries to remember if he has ever heard of a character named Chloe in the game. Maybe she was someone that was introduced after he stopped playing the game, but that makes no sense either. When he stopped playing, the game's core narrative had already gone so far that introducing a new character would be completely pointless. It looks like he has run into an extra just like him. Giamma asks her to keep the incident that happened during the exam a secret. He doesn't want word of his power getting spread around the school and potentially ruining his safe and easy lifestyle. Chloe agrees to his request, but then she starts to make a request of her own before being cut off by their homeroom teacher barging into the room with a loud shout. Giamma tells her to go back to her seat so they can talk later as the class starts and the teacher takes the podium. He congratulates the fresh faces for making it into the academy, and informs them that they have been chosen to take on a legacy that the brave hero Valor Hoken once took on himself. Then the teacher introduces himself as Lee Wanbin, the instructor of Wolf class. Since it's their first day, he wants the class to begin with some basic physical exercise. He tells them to put on their workout gear and meet at the training area in 30 minutes. One student asks what the physical exercise will be, and he tells them that it's simply 100 push-ups, sit-ups, and squats, as well as 10 laps around the training area. For the students who are all genius nobles that have received vigorous training all their lives, this is a piece of cake. For Giamma, though, this is a training regimen that will most certainly make him go bald. He nervously walks up to the teacher after all the others have left the class and tells him that he's not feeling strong enough to take on the training. Surprisingly, not only does the teacher know his name, He also seems to think incredibly highly of Giamma. It looks like Medea didn't completely keep her impression of Giamma under wraps. The instructor also told Li Wanbin that Giamma is allowed to take classes from any level he wants considering his status. He denies the opportunity to go to the star class, and instead tells the teacher that he just wants to go to the toilet for now. He felt stiff anyway, and he wouldn't mind going for that run since he definitely doesn't want to go to the star class. And that's how Giamma is forced to join in the tedious exercise with the rest of his classmates. They all run past him with ease while he barely lags behind the rest of the group, already feeling like he's about to pass out. Chloe runs up beside him and notices that he doesn't look so great. So far, he has completed about 5 laps, which puts him a bit behind the rest, but since Chloe came up from behind him, it looks like she's lagging behind as well. He asks her how far she has gone, and she surprisingly tells him that she's on her 9th lap. Then she gives him a little bit of encouragement before zooming off to complete her last lap. By the end of the day, Giamma returns to his dorm room and chugs down several bottles of water. He's been in the academy for just a week, and he has already faced some unexpected problems. He was incredibly hungry after the intense training from the morning, and he ran to the cafeteria to get some food, but he quickly found out that the meal wasn't free. So he heads to the menu area to see how much one spicy pork rice would be, and the price makes him freeze in shock. Just remembering how much it is even now in his bed causes him to throw his bottle into a wall in a blind rage. He's almost out of his living expenses, and thinking back, he severely regrets not accepting the money his father tried to give him as an allowance. For the past few days, he has been surviving on nothing but the cheapest water from the campus shop, and now he even misses the complimentary dinners they used to provide while he was in the army in his previous life. For now, all he can do is try to think about something else in hopes of forgetting this gnawing hunger, and the first thing that comes to mind is his blessing. As usual, as soon as he thinks about it, the status screen appears in front of him, giving him details about his blessing. It has gotten a lot longer since last time, and that's because his physical level has risen, which has also upgraded the state of the blessing of the sword god, making it activate with slightly longer swords now. He checks himself out in the mirror, and sure enough, it looks like he has made good progress in his physical development. It's probably because the Swordmaster activated his pressure points, but it almost feels like his body has evolved to a great extent. However, the Sword God's blessing hasn't spread beyond the length of a sashimi knife. If he keeps increasing his physical capabilities, it's possible that he may even be able to use a small sword at some point. There was once a time when he was afraid of holding a sword before the admission ceremony, but now, when he's not carrying a sword, his hands start to itch. This is probably a result of the blessing, and he feels almost proud to think about it. There's a knock on the door, and he opens it to see Chloe waiting for him on the other side. She nervously asks if she's interrupting anything, but Giamma wasn't doing anything important before she came, and he asks her why she came over. It's because she hasn't been seeing him in the university cafeteria for a while, and she came over to check if he's all right. He lies that the reason he has not been in the cafeteria is because he doesn't normally consume food made by others, but his internal self practically salivates at the thought of food. Chloe looks disappointed about that, and tells him that she was hoping to get some things from the campus shop so they can have dinner together. Before she can even finish her thought, Giamma is dressed up and calling her to follow along so they can go and buy ingredients. Chloe is shocked at his speed and tries to rush along with him, while the two of them talk about food and cooking together. By the evening, the two of them have had a great meal cooked by Giamma, and Chloe is genuinely impressed by how tasty the food is. Giamma has only ever cooked fish before, so at first, things were a bit difficult for them. Incidentally, Chloe really likes fish, since she grew up close to a beach, and Giamma's expertise is obviously cooking fish. The itch in his hands to grab a sword also hadn't left him, so this is a great time to refresh himself by slicing some sashimi. The problem is the sword god's blessing. He can't hold a simple kitchen knife without activating the blessing, meaning that this will definitely be difficult for him. He asks Chloe if she owns a larger knife, and tells her that he wants to use something different since his own weapons resemble the kitchen knives that she has, so using them to cook would be a bit awkward. She heads into her room and comes back with a large sword for him to use, but that's definitely way too large, just a simple fish. With no other choice, he is forced to use his blessing to slice a piece of fish. The painless blessing will last for 30 minutes, so he just has to make sure that he's fast enough to finish before the blessing runs out. He was once called the greatest swordsman in the country, and cutting fish has always been his specialty. Now it's time for him to prove that fact. He slices the fish and manages to finish in 21 seconds, leaving 9 seconds of the painless blessing for him to use. The whole thing was done so well that he would call it a masterpiece. Chloe asks how he's so good at cooking, and he confesses that he once worked part-time at a Japanese restaurant. Since she's a noble, she doesn't understand what a part-time job is, and it makes it clear that they are from different social positions. Now that the meal is done, Chloe offers to wash the dishes since he cooked all the food for them, and he moves over to the other side of the room to give her space to clean. For the first time in almost a week, he's full, and he can't help but hum in joy. That humming is broken as Chloe accidentally drops a plate behind him. It's most likely because she has never had to clean dishes before, and dropping plates is something that he used to do when he was her age. As he stares out the window and ignores the breaking of plates behind him, a book tumbles off of Chloe's study desk. It looks like it's a diary, and the book coincidentally lands on a page where she writes about him saving her during the class placement test. Her handwriting is cute with rounded shapes and stickers, and he finds himself picking up the book and smiling at it. The wind from the window turns the pages of the book to another part where she writes about meeting him in the same class and being interested in him. He finds it all really cute and can't help himself as he turns through more pages, admiring how cute she is. He turns a few more pages and sees his name again, followed by numerous pages with the words, "I love you," written countless times. Another plate breaks again, and he turns to see Chloe staring at him with blank, scary eyes. She simply asks him if he has read her diary. Chloe's emotionless state isn't a new thing. It's part of her upbringing, and it's more like a self-defense mechanism. Heroes earn respect by defeating demonic beasts, and this allows them to increase their social standing and to gain global reputation. However, within their stagnate ranks, there are certain factions that abuse the weak in the name of authority. When the law is unable to punish these abusers, another group is called from the shadows to take care of these people, and the name of that family is Auditor Sicily. They are a family that maintains order and carries out assassinations. They are known to work in the shadows while leading towards the light. Those born in the auditory family have been training for assassinations since before they even reached adolescence. Their emotions are restrained, and they undergo severe training to become perfect assassination machines. Chloe is a part of this blood-stained family, and the first time she soiled her palms with blood was at the age of 15. She has been told all her life to not underestimate her abilities as an assassin, and this has allowed her to become completely conscious of herself. Slowly, her unyielding training distorted her nature, and a gloomy shadow formed over her heart. By the time her identity had been worn down, leaving only traces of emotion, Chloe eventually reached the age to enter the academy. Joaquin Academy is a place where students are placed in different classrooms based on their aptitude. Each student's talent is at least the level of a dragon or higher, but members of the Auditor family who thrived in the shadows were assigned to the common class by their family's decree. That was the agreement between the family and the academy. She was told to remain undetected, and throughout the years of childhood, the family eliminated every individual's liberty. Chloe accepted her fate as an assassin and didn't protest, and she already believed that nothing would alter her fate. That is until the day she met someone she would never forget. As she stood still and defenseless while the two evil brothers walked towards her, someone who looked like the weakest person in the room stood up to defend her. Even though death in the subspace battle royale is fake, and there is no real risk of dying, this boy still tried to save her. Chloe had quietly accepted death and was waiting for her predestined fate. She had long since given up on meaningless struggles, and she was trained to act in a meek and unnoticeable manner. But somehow, thanks to the boy's intervention, it's like the sun had broken through the clouds in her mind, and she watched as the boy used his sword not to assassinate, but in self-defense, and to protect her. Right as she saw him fighting for her, she remembered a children's fairy tale she read aloud under her pillow in secret. The tale told of a princess imprisoned in a castle that was rescued by a prince. As the memories of the fairy tale came to her mind, her chest tingles and her cheeks became red. This unidentifiable feeling in her was most certainly love. Now Giamma has committed the ultimate sin by looking into the private thoughts of this girl. As she stares him down, he tries to play it off, but he knows deep down that he is screwed. He tries to figure out exactly how he got into this situation. Was it when he took the pure sentiments of a teenage girl? Or maybe the moment he foolishly followed her because she offered to feed him? No matter how he found himself staring at death itself in the form of a teenage girl, his first priority should be getting out of here. He changes the topic, commenting on how lovely the moon is before casually trying to find a way to leave the room without getting his head chopped off. She doesn't let him finish his sentence and asks him again if he saw her diary. He tries to play it off, pretending that he only saw her reference book and compliments the amount of effort she put into studying, but none of that flattery will save his life right now. He can't even believe that she saw him reading it in the first place, since she was busy washing dishes while he was peeking through it. And she has even abandoned the formal speech she was using to talk to him before. It's almost like she has become an entirely different person out of nowhere. He promises that he didn't see it, but she pesters him until finally he admits that he saw it. As soon as he says that, Chloe decides that his life must end, and she pulls out the same sword that she offered him before to cut the fish. Giamma looks around and weighs his options. They are currently on the 4th floor, so jumping out of the window isn't an option. The only way out for him is through the front door, but Chloe definitely won't let him just walk out of here, at least not with his limbs attached. She really is coming towards him with the sword, and it looks like his time is running out. He tries to figure out why she's suddenly acting this way, and he can only think of one possibility. Her unmoving pupils and her dark red eyes can only mean one thing. He's dealing with a textbook yandere. But if he takes into account her sudden shift in attitude from an adorable little strawberry to a fierce killer, it gets even worse. She's a yandere with a dual personality. Managing her yandere characteristics alone will definitely be difficult, but adding a dual personality disorder to it makes things even worse. It looks like her change in personality was triggered by him opening her diary. This might be harmful, but he's sure that she'll pursue him until the day he passes away if he doesn't do something to snap her out of it. He has to find a way to secure his future by taking the initiative today, else things are only going to get worse for him. The only way he's making it out of here alive is if he gets a weapon, but he only has 9 seconds remaining after using 21 seconds to slice the fish. His sashimi knife is still in his room, but he can use the kitchen knife from earlier. There's no way he's going to be able to reach that without his arms getting severed though. He looks around again and notices a box cutter on her study desk. There's nothing else he can use, but there's no way this little thing is enough to activate the blessing of the sword god, right? Chloe finally rushes him with a sword, and it looks like there's only one way to find out. He grabs the box cutter, spilling the rest of the stationery on the ground, and then unloads the blade. Numerous status screens pop up in front of him. Being resourceful in a situation like this increases his mental resilience, and he temporarily gains an intimidation buff. The system then makes necessary adjustments before activating the blessing. Chloe rushes at him with her sword right as Giamma pulls back with the box cutter. Before she can cut him down, he tells her that her hair is a little long. Thanks to the intimidation buff, Chloe freezes for a moment, right as Giamma unleashes the blade. Everything goes dark and fuzzy, and by the time Chloe wakes up later in the evening, her room is dark, tidy, and empty. Her thoughts immediately go to Giamma, and she wonders where he went off to. She calls out to him a few times, but the silence confirms that she is alone in her room. The last thing she remembers is sneaking looks at him while he was looking out of her window, but everything is fuzzy after that. She suddenly feels the need to look for her katana, but she sees it leaning against her study desk. She sometimes loses consciousness whenever she holds her katana, but it looks like she managed to hold herself together this time. At least that's what she thinks anyway. Back when she was younger and still honing her skills, she would lose consciousness when holding her blade, and by the time she would come to her senses, the place would be covered in blood, and her elders would dismiss her whenever she would ask what she did while passed out. They would always remind her not to deny her talent as an assassin. Still, the fact that she can't remember what she did with Giamma makes her feel embarrassed, and she buries her head in her bed in shame. But that shame quickly turns to something else entirely as she starts thinking about Giamma. Then she notices the box cutter laying on the floor and also that her hair looks shorter. Inside her trash bin, she also sees some of her hair, neatly cleaned up. That's when she realizes that he must have helped her cut her hair, and she opens up her journal to write about her love for him a little more. Giamma, on the other hand, isn't nearly as lovesick as Chloe is at the moment. In fact, right now, he can barely believe that he's even alive. Behind an inconspicuous wall at the far side of the college, he throws up the food that he was just praising Chloe for feeding him. He barely managed to go past the first 5 seconds after the 9 seconds of his painless blessing ended, and even then, he still feels incredibly sick and weak. After throwing up his only good meal in over a week, Giamma sits on a bench and contemplates what to do next. Now he's hungry again, and feeling even worse than he did before Chloe came to visit. His mind drifts to Chloe again, and he starts to wonder who exactly she is. Her swordsmanship is clearly honed to cut off an opponent's life with a single strike, or at least subdue them. The way Chloe wields her sword, it's like she is persistently aiming for the vital spots, almost as if her technique is specialized in assassination. If she had caught him off guard, Giamma certainly wouldn't have survived. He felt like his life was being threatened, so he instinctively aimed for her neck. Fortunately, the knife was too short, so he only managed to cut her hair. Before he left, he cleaned up the mess so there shouldn't be any problems later, but this is just further proof that keeping his peaceful and safe life isn't as simple as it looks. Apparently, being ordinary is the hardest thing for him. When he was first thrown into this game, it's not like he didn't have any ambition. In his past life, he once reached the pinnacle of skill with nothing but a sashimi knife, so it's not like he could easily let go of his dreams. But everyone has a role to play, and in this world, he was summoned as a background character. Miracle Blessing is the title of the game as well as the name of the protagonist's blessing. It was also the blessing of the founding hero, Valorjakin. In the whole game, the protagonist and the founding hero were the only two people to ever possess the legendary blessing. And the description of the blessing was straightforward. They are to save the world from the Demon King. So the protagonist gets chosen by Balmung, which is an SS sword that is both holy and cursed. Meanwhile, all Gyama has is a lowly, rankless sashimi knife. There's nothing else to say. He's just bound for a life of obscurity. The endless stream of extraordinary people and situations that he has faced since entering the academy almost made him forget about his goal. There were plenty of reasons to give up on the goal of a simple life, and it's even more apparent now that it seems like there isn't even one normal person in the entire world. Since he has played the game before, he has a rough grasp of the key characters in the game, but his knowledge of the world itself is limited. It's already been a week since he joined the academy at this point, which means that the protagonist should have already awakened his blessing and begun the late admission process. This is when the game's story actually begins, and Gyama knows the general plot, but he never played it to the end. For the first time, he actually regrets quitting the game halfway through, but still, since he knows the canon route up to the first half of the story, that already gives him a big advantage. All he has to do is stick to the canon route no matter what. If he starts meddling in everything, then he'll end up losing the only advantage that he has. From his memory, he knows that the storyline takes a sudden dark turn around the second semester of the third year, which is when the demons realize that the hero has awakened, and they launch an attack on the academy, led by a legion commander. As the fight escalates, the demons and the humans spiral into an all-out war, and from there, the game's story turns into a typical fantasy novel. Back when he was playing it, he just wanted to emulate the carefree, simple, youthful life that he never experienced as a teenager, so he deleted the game without a second thought. The problem is that now, he's part of the world that is destined for war, and there's a very real possibility that he might die too. He still has 3 years before then though, and he needs to stop running from reality so he can focus on what's possible. He won't let himself die, and he will focus on growing stronger so he can survive. Besides, cliché games like this one always have happy endings where the protagonist manages to save the world. All he needs is enough strength to protect himself, so he can't let himself be some helpless weakling that gets killed off. He just needs to train enough to protect himself while keeping as low a profile as possible. To do that, he will have to minimize his use of the blessing of the sword god, because just the few times he has had to rely on it has put immense strain on his body. It's a powerful ability, but it comes with way too many drawbacks for his liking. Thinking about the blessing once again activates a status window that gives him information about it. Weirdly enough though, there are new entries to the information that he didn't notice before. The 3 new entries are a body, mind, and armament grade, and the numbers beside them seem to be levels. They all reflect how much he has grown, and each one will lessen the strain of his blessing on his body. There's also one more called synchronization, but he has no idea what it means, and its description is just some question marks. He tries tapping on it, but access to it is denied because he has not met the relevant conditions. That's another puzzle to add to this mysterious blessing, but it's not important right now. His main priority at the moment should be improving his body and finding a new weapon. He can't depend on the 30 seconds of the painless blessing forever, so he also needs to learn to wield a sword that doesn't meet the condition of the blessing. Luckily, there's a monster hunting training for the midterms that's happening in a month. The reward for the training is the longsword Murasame. It's a B-tier weapon that should serve him until graduation. It's also too big for his blessing to activate, meaning that it's the perfect weapon for him. There's a lot to figure out, but it already feels like he's making good progress. While lost in thought, a voice calls out to him suddenly. He looks up, and staring back down at him is someone he never expected to see or talk to. It's Abel von Nibelung, the granddaughter of the Sword Emperor, and the one person that he really shouldn't be interacting with if he wants to avoid changing the game's story. She tells him that he's on her seat, but he's too stunned to get up for a moment, forcing her to yell at him before he finally gets the message and slides away to give her space. He still can't get over just how pretty Abel is, and he caught himself staring without even noticing. As he tries to leave, she tells him that he doesn't have to go. He can just shuffle over a bit instead. It's weird that she'd call a public bench her seat, but he lets it go since he doesn't really want to get involved with her. He still can't help staring at her, and just as he would expect from the heroine of the game, she really is gorgeous. Suddenly she starts talking, and that startles Giamma back to the present. This is definitely way too odd since the Abel that he knows is usually standoffish and doesn't talk to people. Even the handsome protagonist of the game couldn't get her to warm up to him. She continues talking, asking him if he also uses a blade as his weapon, and he sheepishly answers her before asking how she knows. She tells him that her grandpa once told her that swordsmen have a different look in their eyes. Then she shows him her sword and asks if he wants to hold it. He's still feeling a bit odd about the whole thing, so he declines the offer, but that just makes her pout in annoyance. It looks like he hurt her feelings, but he just can't get used to her talking to him. Then she asks him if he knows her. Giamma is surprised at first, but that's an odd question for her to ask. There's no one in the school who doesn't know who she is. He answers her in a blank way, saying that he sort of knows her, but then she tells him that she doesn't know him. She considers that a bit unfair, the fact that he knows her, but she has no clue who he is. Giamma doesn't agree since they have only just met, so it's not important if they know each other's names, but she tells him that he could be a spy sent by the Demon King, who's sneaking into the academy, dressed as a student. It's quite suspicious that he's out here, alone, this late at night, and although it looks like she's just saying random things, it almost looks like she's serious. Giamma then throws the question back at her, and asks her why she's out so late at night. It's obvious though from her clothes and weapon that she just finished training and working out. She tells him that she did breathing exercises and then points at him as she talks, unintentionally giving Giamma a full view of the scars on her hands. She hurriedly hides her hands, but Giamma has already seen them. They are signs of her hard work, and Abel agrees with that, since it's obvious that she of all people would be working hard. People don't understand what it means to belong to the Nibelung bloodline. They are expected to always be at their best, and to be flawless. One slip up, and they could become a target. Abel then reveals that she is not the top student of the year, and this is the first time that she has ever lost to someone in her life. But somehow, even though she should be upset, she feels strangely liberated. She can't help wondering who exactly beat her and became the top scorer though. She would love to meet them, so she can tear them apart. That causes Giamma to cough out in shock, and he asks her why she would go that far. The reason is because she feels humiliated. She begged her grandfather to tell her who that person is, but apparently, the person isn't even in her class. On top of that, they also skipped the speech, which means she had to do it in their stead, and that only felt even more embarrassing as the second place. She stops herself before she goes even further with her ranting. It's odd of her to decide to share all this information with someone she just met. On that note, Giamma finally asks the question that has been on his mind this entire time. He wants to know why she's talking to him in the first place, considering her personality, and how she usually feels about others. The reason is definitely not what he expected. It's because he looks weak. It's her family's motto to be unyielding to the strong and merciful to the weak, and all her classmates are already unbearable enough, so she doesn't have any friends. That would explain why she's so cold to the protagonist in the game. With that done, Abel gives a little stretch, then prepares to leave. As she gets up, she pauses for a moment, and then asks him if he really isn't going to tell her his name. Just like before, Giamma refuses with no room for negotiation. Time continues to pass, and to Giamma's surprise, he continues his academy life without any trouble. Chloe seems to have made some new friends apart from him, and she has settled into the class just fine, and Giamma has been keeping himself busy by avoiding her ever since the incident in her room. Sometimes when their eyes meet, her new friends look at him with disdain because of his status as a special entrant. But Giamma has managed to stop caring about people that look down on him for being a special entrant. After all, he's not the only special entrant in their class anyways. Although there aren't many of them in the class, they have all been really good at avoiding each other. There's definitely some kind of inferiority complex at play. But Giamma is sure that things would be so much worse if he was placed in a higher tier class. By now, the students in the Star and Dragon classes have most likely split into factions and become wrapped up in petty power struggles. Even back when he played the game, it was pretty shocking to experience. But now that he's living in this world, just the thought of being in that world sends a shiver through his spine. In good news though, he has been getting proper meals now. That's thanks to something that Medea gave to him the other day. As a special privilege for being the top scorer in the school, he gets a faculty card that allows him to eat whatever he wants from the cafeteria for free. He's so thankful for this little gift that bowing to the director's office 3 times a day doesn't feel like enough to express his gratitude. On top of that, He has been fulfilling his duties as a student pretty well, all while making sure that he hasn't done anything that could negatively affect the main storyline. All he has to do is keep it this way for the next 3 years, and his life will go smoothly. The days go by smoothly, and Jiyama attends all his classes without any problems. During one of his classes, an elderly teacher educates the students about the hero Valor Jyokin, who founded the academy after recognizing the need to train the next generation of heroes. Jiyama pretty much knows about all of this from the games already. The founding hero, Valor Joaquin, faced Lycan, the Demon King's right-hand man, and the commander of the First Legion. The battle went on for 20 years, and in the end, the hero emerged victorious. However, Joaquin lost one of his arms as a consequence for his victory, and as a result, he could no longer fight. The war was filled with carnage and bloodshed, and although the hero won the battle, there was no clear winner of the war on either side. And just like that, the first human-demon war ended in a truce. In order to train the next generation, Joaquin founded the academy, and a non-aggression pact was signed between the two races. That pact is the reason that there have been 700 years of peace that still stands till today. The students are sure that they won't see any war in their lifetime, but Jiyama is the only one that knows that the peace will be broken. Everyone is so used to the calm at this point, and it's no surprise. The only person he would want to warn about the impending doom would be Medea, but doing so would also alter the canon route, and he has no idea what that would lead to. Despite constantly complaining about wanting to leave her position as an academy director, Medea was one of the first to notice that something was about to happen, thanks to her blessing of perception. In order to protect her students, she was the first among the 7 stars to step onto the front lines, but Jiyama never played the game to that point. However, he did learn of her fate from reading the game's fandom wiki. Medea was the first of the 7 stars to fall in battle against the Demon King's army. Knowing this makes it hard to keep the war a secret, but he wishes that he never knew in the first place. The class ends and students start to head out to the school halls because of some sort of commotion going on out there. It looks like it's finally time for things to start, and Jiyama takes a moment to check his phone. Just like he thought, it's the 5th of May, and today is the day that the protagonist will finally join the school. He joins the group of students crowding at the class door, and they are all in awe of him, and some are already certain that he's going to join the star class. Just as he suspected, the protagonist of the game walks through the halls as people part for him to move. Leon van Reinhardt walks with a confident aura among his fellow students, but Jiyama knows that today is the day that the peace that lasted 700 years would start to crumble. Jiyama watches as everyone in the school seems to fawn over him, but he already knew that this would happen. After all, in the game, every woman seems to fall for him. If this were an adult-rated game, Leon would definitely have been dead before facing the Demon King. Among all the women that are seemingly drawn to him, the ones who become his party members are also pretty impressive. It's annoying to think about, but Leon van Reinhardt, the protagonist of Miracle Blessing M, will be among the first to get drafted in 3 years. Although he calls it a draft, it's more like a mandatory enlistment, and if Jiyama gets drafted as well, this will also be his 2nd time in the army. But the hero only barely managed to seal the First Legion commander, which only makes Jiyama wonder how strong the Demon King is. There's no way that the protagonist is going to lose, right? As he wonders about all of this, his eyes lock with Leon, and the protagonist smiles charmingly at him, almost as if he's reassuring Jiyama without knowing what he's thinking. He's the protagonist after all. There's no way he won't be able to handle these kinds of threats. Jiyama turns to walk away from the scene, but suddenly someone calls him from behind. It's Chloe, and she meekly asks if she did something wrong. He'd love to tell her that she almost cut off his head, but they will be spending the next year together, and it would suck if he made things awkward between them. He lies that there's no problem between them in hopes of keeping things civil, so he doesn't end up making any unnecessary enemies. Chloe at least seems relieved, and she's back to acting cute just like he remembers, which is so different from the murderous psychopath he faced that day. Despite her being unconscious, he could tell that her swordsmanship is filled with sorrow. It's as if it was a blade pleasing to be saved, and yet the killing intent radiating from the edge is so intense that it made his skin crawl. If the purpose of her swordsmanship is simply for killing, then she's probably more dangerous than the Mao siblings. He's snapped from his thoughts when she asks to treat him to dinner again tonight. She wants to treat him, but she warns that she's not as good at cooking as he is. The mention of having dinner with her again brings those thoughts of her bloodlust back to mind, and he almost instinctively wants to refuse her. But the puppy dog eyes of a cute girl are a terrifying weapon. It's almost impossible for him to say no to a face that cute, and he feels bad for even thinking of refusing. But if he doesn't refuse, he might wake up in a fridge tomorrow morning. Instead of dinner, though, he has a better idea for them to spend time together. He asks her for a favor and tells her that she's the only one that can do it for him, and that caused Chloe to become docile immediately. Giamma wants her to teach him swordsmanship, and he needed a sword instructor anyway. Later, in the school's training grounds, he swings a wooden sword while testing his own limits. Just as he expected, because of the size of the sword, it doesn't affect the blessing. Now all he needs to do is try to develop some swordsmanship skills. Chloe is insanely strong. She'd be the perfect person to train him. This is also a pretty good excuse for him to avoid going to dinner with her again. Ever since that day, he made sure to watch a video called Surviving a Yandere before going to bed. Somehow, it looks like it has helped him in dealing with Chloe for the meantime. Chloe walks up to him, in casual clothes, with her katana attached at her hip. He just arrived since they planned to meet at 8, but she's been waiting for him since 6:30. Giamma takes a moment to admire her, and her crop top gives him a good view of her muscles. He couldn't notice it before because he only ever saw her in a school uniform, but that would explain why she's so strong. He gives her another wooden sword, and Chloe is confused that they aren't using real swords. There's no way that they can train with real swords, and they are definitely not fighting with their lives on the line, so there's no need for them to use real weapons. Chloe gladly takes the wooden sword from him and tests the swing, and the power of her thrust with the sword is enough to send a small shockwave crashing between them. She's so strong that the air around them is trembling just from that strike, and Giamma starts to get second thoughts about asking her to train him. For now, he needs to err on the side of caution. Before their training starts, he decides to check his blessing one more time. The sword's length isn't an issue, thankfully, and his body has been growing steadily. But now that he thinks about it, it's odd for a blessing to upgrade with experience. He doesn't remember if blessings also come with additional side effects, and he also has no idea how much more he needs to grow before the mysterious hidden trait shows up. Chloe walks up to him and asks him what's wrong, and he's reminded of the fact that only he can see his status screen. To her, he must have looked like a crazy guy who's spacing out. He turns to start their training and nervously asks Chloe to go easy on him since today is their first day. Then he readies himself with his sword and faces Chloe. In his past life, he learned everything through hands-on experience. He firmly believes that to master something you can't just give a piece of yourself. You have to be ready to sacrifice your entire being. The reason he adapted so quickly in the academy is because of the training that he received in his class. He learned from a young age how to read when he's growing and when he's stagnant, and even now, he can tell that things aren't perfect in both his stance and his grip on his sword. However, even with all of that, the final stroke of the sword must always strike the opponent. He opens his eyes to begin the duel and sees Chloe already rushing towards him at full force. He barely has time to dodge her first strike, as Chloe switches her stance and launches another attack which he is barely able to parry. Somehow, as the fight continues, she seems to keep getting faster, and Giamma is barely able to keep up with her pace. And on top of all of that, she might even be holding back since he told her to go easy on him. Her sword clashes with his again, and this time, the wood begins to crack from the force. Her relentless onslaught of attacks doesn't slow down though, and she continues to strike while he barely manages to parry and dodge. With how much force she's using, if he gets hit by even one of her attacks, he might actually die. And he can't find any opening to counterattack. But before he can even figure out how to counterattack, his sword has finally had enough, and it breaks in half. Chloe tries to apologize and tells him that she was going as gently as she could be. She still ended up breaking it. That is the least of her worries though, because the sword has reduced in size and length, which means that unfortunately for her, the sword meets the conditions for the sword god blessing to activate. However, there's something terribly wrong. The weapon has been damaged, which causes an error in the system. The suppressive force that usually holds back the full power of the blessing instead starts altering Giamma's personality. By the time the alteration is done, his humanity level has decreased, leaving Giamma as a fighting shell. The sword god's divine blessing fully activates as Giamma turns to her with his half-broken wooden sword as a menacing aura builds around him. Chloe steps back as Giamma's entire attitude clearly starts to change. While Giamma's body seems to move on autopilot, inside Giamma's mind, he's returned to his past body and finds himself in his kitchen. Everything feels like a dream, and right now, all he can think about is cleaning and cutting the fish that has appeared in front of him. He doesn't remember what he was doing before this, but right now, he just has to get back to work. It's been a while since he has worked on a fish like this, so he decides to cut the fish using a Chinese cleaver this time. As he tries to pick it up, a message pops up, informing him that he can't pick it up. Since that's not working, he tries to pick up the knife, but once again, a message pops up telling him that he can't pick it up. There's only one option left, and it's the sashimi knife. That's the only blade that the system allows him to pick up, but he remembers that if he holds the sashimi knife, then it's going to hurt. However, he picks it up, and it's completely fine. In fact, he even feels refreshed if anything. A voice speaks up in his head, telling him to just accept the situation and let things go. In the real world, Giamma continues to approach Chloe with the knife. She tries to call out for him, but he continues walking towards her with obvious bloodlust. Suddenly, he rushes towards her and Chloe is just barely able to block his attack with her sword. He pushes against her sword and sends her flying backwards and crashing into a wall. He suddenly feels completely different from when they were sparring before. He jumps towards her and tries to stab her with the sharp end of his stake, but she barely jumps back and avoids the hit. Chloe only got hit with one attack, but she can barely move. She can't figure out how Giamma became this way all of a sudden, but she has to find a way to stop the spar before he ends up accidentally killing her. She tries to ask him again to stop, but Giamma doesn't respond and launches at her again. He's moving so fast that there's no way she's going to be able to avoid it at her current state. All she can do is continue begging him to stop, and eventually, she shouts out his name, right as the sword strikes down straight towards her head. Back in Giamma's dream world, he wonders why the fish he's been trying to cut is avoiding him. The fish also seems to be making a lot of noise while bouncing around, and he can just barely tell what it's saying. It sounds like it's calling out someone's name. The sound becomes less fuzzy until he can just barely hear the fish calling out for someone named Giamma. Chef Kim's mind starts to clear and eventually he realizes that he is Giamma, and the fish is calling for him. He's just barely able to realize what's happening right as he is about to stab Chloe with the broken sword. Just before the wood can pierce her skin, Giamma throws the sword, slamming it into a wall just before he accidentally kills his friend. Chloe opens her eyes and sees Giamma holding her and smiling down at her. Because he's no longer holding the sword, the blessing has ended, and he's back to his senses. Chloe nervously asks if he is all right, and he calmly tells her that he's fine, and then turns to leave while thanking her for helping him to train. After he leaves, Chloe makes her way back to her dorm room as well. She's had a feeling since the entrance exam, but Giamma's capabilities are more peculiar than strong. When she fought him, she could tell he wasn't fighting with skill but just raw instinct. Even though he subconsciously activated his divine blessing, she was no match for him. Even with that halved wooden sword, he managed to completely overpower her. As she walks through the campus, someone peeks out from the shadows and comments that Chloe looks quite content. This mysterious newcomer is Nox Auditore, and also Chloe's older brother. Nox mocks her for hanging out with a lowly person after joining the academy. Chloe knows that he's talking about Giamma and warns him not to talk about her friend like that. Nox didn't even know his name until now, but warns Chloe that she should avoid loitering around with him, unless the Auditore family will erase him. Chloe turns and walks away, and tells Nox that even if the Auditore comes, they will be no match for Giamma. As Chloe walks away, Nox wonders about this guy that has changed his sister so drastically. Speaking of Giamma, as he walks home, he also takes a moment to think about his blessing. The power he has been given is a far cry from the blessing or a favor from a god. It's more like a curse if anything. In order not to rely on the sword god's blessing, he tried to find new weapons, and yet that power chased after him and even took control of his body, as if mocking his efforts to not rely on it. When he fought Chloe, he felt no pain, and instead he felt pleasure as if he was intoxicated. Just like a curse, the blessing toyed around with him like a puppet, and it whispered sweet words into his ear telling him to slash, cut, and destroy. Because of that, he gave up his body right until Chloe's screams dragged him out of his daze. Thanks to that, he suddenly remembered his own name, and he returned to reality. Thanks to that, he regained consciousness just long enough to throw the wooden sword away because he felt like he would lose more of himself forever if he didn't get rid of it as fast as possible. It's funny to think that Chloe, a yandere who almost killed him not too long ago, is now the girl that managed to pull him out of his daze. He was pissed off that she broke the sword in the first place, but in the end, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. That's why he didn't make a fuss when he returned to reality. He was terrified of activating the sword god's blessing again, but today proves that he can't just ignore this issue for the rest of his life. This gift is something he has to deal with for the rest of his life, and it's the reason that his wish to live life normally will most likely never be fulfilled. As he practically crawls his way back to his room, Giamma realizes that there is something in him that is trying to devour his sense of reason. This definitely isn't a blessing. It's a curse that is trying to consume him whole. 3 days later, classes continue as usual, and Chloe chats with her new friends, but something is clearly wrong. Since they had that duel, Giamma has not been coming to class, and they never shared their contact info, so she hasn't even been able to check on him. Every time she went to his dorm, the only thing that she would hear in response to her knocks were pained groans. She considered breaking the door down, but she feared that he would end up hating her for it. She likes watching him from her seat during class, and she lost track of how many times she would secretly glance at him during the day. At first she thought she was drawn to him because he risked his life for her, but that's probably just an excuse at this point. Whatever the reason that she's drawn to him now, she just misses him. The next day, Giamma still hasn't shown up to class by the time the teacher is yelling at everyone to settle down and be quiet. It's raining today, so the teacher tells them that they will be having a study hall instead of training. As the students start to make their way to their seats, he too also notices that Giamma has not shown up for several days. However, knowing him, there has to be some reason for it, so the instructor decides to just wait patiently for him to return on his own. As he disciplines his students, the doors to the class creak open, and Giamma calmly struts in with a completely new look. Chloe stands out of her seat in shock as Giamma apologizes to the instructor for being late to class. His eyes are sunken and look almost dead, while a strand of hair on his head has turned pale white. Even the instructor is a bit shocked at Giamma's new look, just like the rest of the students, and he nervously tells Giamma to sit down. The students remark that Giamma looks different and oddly more handsome. By the end of the day, the other students leave the class to go about their business while Chloe approaches Giamma for the first time in 4 days. She nervously asks him what happened and why he didn't show up for a long while, and he stays quiet for a bit before telling her that he just felt a little bit sick and not to worry about him. From her shaky voice, he can tell that she doesn't believe his words completely, but there's nothing else he can do to convince her. For the past 3 days, he went through something similar to extreme withdrawal symptoms until he was mentally exhausted. He couldn't get out of his room or eat anything, so he just buried himself in his bed while praying that his convulsions would go away. The pain he suffered during this time was far worse than before, and all of this was a price for using the broken weapon. On top of that, when he glanced in the mirror, even though his appearance seemed the same, his expression was far more sunken, and his hair seemed to be turning white. All of this was very clearly a penalty from the sword god. Chloe seems guilty, and it's probably because the last time she saw him was at the training grounds, so she must think that this is somehow her fault. To calm her down, he asks her if she's still interested in having that dinner with him like she wanted before. That shocks Chloe even more than him coming back to class, and she nearly rushes him in a hug. It looks like that was the right choice because she seemed to really like that suggestion. She asks him what he would like to eat, and the first thing that comes to his mind is fish. As they talk, a strange sensation passes through him, and he turns to see someone staring at them from the end of the hall. It's Chloe's brother Knox, and the atmosphere changes as soon as they see him. Giamma goes directly to confront the newcomer and tells him that instead of staring, he should come in and talk to them. Right away, Giamma notices something wrong with the guy's eyes, but Chloe tries to get in between them before something crazy happens. Her voice is shaky, and there's definitely some hesitation in how she's acting, but she's still trying to protect him in her own way. Knox asks Chloe if this is really the guy she's choosing to break Adarote's rules for. Chloe tells him that she wants nothing to do with her family, but her brother reminds her that she can't just wash the blood off her hands. If someone is born as an auditor, then they will always be an auditor. Chloe is speaking as if she's a rebel, and the brother is speaking as if he's from a historical drama, but Giamma is just annoyed by the whole thing. Knox continues to insult Giamma, and that finally causes Chloe to snap. She yells for Knox to stop talking about the man she loves like that, and her angry voice surprises even him. Giamma hoped that this whole thing could at least be done in moderation, but he's starting to get used to these disruptions in his life. The more important thing is the family name Auditore. He knows that they are a group that works in the shadows and specializes in assassination, and they show up in the middle of the game to play a major role. It's said that they are weaker compared to other heroic houses, but they are unrivaled in assassination. All the members of the Auditore clan are ridiculously strong thanks to their abusive training regimen, which they all undergo from childhood, which molds them into cutting-edge assassination tools. For Chloe to be from this assassination group, that means her cute and bubbly personality makes her the abnormal one in this situation, unlike her brother. Knox has an expression that shows that he's used to killing, and although Giamma has nothing against that, it looks like Chloe wants to lead a normal life instead. Just like his blessing of the sword god, the environment of the Auditores is something that Chloe had no say in being a part of. She's destined to live a life as an emotionless murderer, and that's almost unfortunate to think about. Jiyama doesn't think he's a hero, and he has no intention of ever becoming one. But even if he can't save the world, he can at least try to save the life of one girl. He steps between Chloe and her brother, and confronts Nox directly. In the end, he tried escaping the sword god's blessing, but he couldn't, so instead he'll take a step forward and embrace this curse. After all, the name Jiyama means sword demon. With that, he walks past the two assassin siblings and tells Nox to follow him. Meanwhile, Lee Wanbin sits in his office with thoughts of his student running through his mind. When Jiyama came to class that morning, it was very obvious that something had happened to him. His expression was void of emotion, and he looked deeply troubled. As he's thinking to himself, one of his fellow instructors walks into the room cheerfully while also remarking on the man's baldness. Before they can keep talking, Lee Wanbin gets a call from the administrators, and they want his permission to allow a student of his to use the subspace. Lee Wanbin desperately asks to know which of his cadets requested to use the subspace all of a sudden, and they confirm that it is Kang Jiyama who requested it, hoping to face Nox Auditore. The stage is set for Jiyama and Nox's fight, and our MC waits patiently in the locker room with 15 minutes left before the fight starts. He thought the process to get access to the subspace would be complicated, but it went by pretty quickly. It's definitely thanks to Medea, who at least wanted him to be safe while fighting a professional assassin. At least, since he won't be fighting in reality, that means that he doesn't have to worry about physical injuries, but there's still a pretty good chance that he could suffer mental ones. However, none of that matters as long as he can win. He can hear all the noise in the arena from the waiting room, and it looks like the fight between the two students managed to draw some unintended buzz. It's almost ironic that he was trying his best not to stick out before, but right now, that all feels pointless. Beside him, Chloe is practically drowning in grief and guilt. She's probably blaming herself for this whole situation, and Jiyama tries to assure her that it really isn't her fault, and she even lent him some gear, so everything will turn out alright in the end. She tells him that Nox is really strong, and he's a genius with unmatched talent in the entire history of the Auditore family. When it comes to the dark arts, there's no one that's up to his level, and at the age of 14, he was already dubbed the pinnacle of the dark arts. That's a pretty cringy name, but it does show how strong he is. Jiyama stares down at the rose-colored blade in his hand, as he remembers the decisions that led him up to this point. His old teacher always used to tell him that he is destined to wield a blade for his whole life. He never expected that he would still be running around with a sashimi knife even in his next reincarnation. An announcement comes over the speaker, informing the students that the subspace battle is about to begin. He gets up to leave the locker room, but not before reassuring Chloe one more time that he is going to win. He steps out into the arena, and is immediately bombarded by the excited cheering of his fellow students. Jiyama feels like he's one of those gladiators from the Roman Empire with how intense the atmosphere has become. Over in the distance, he can also see that the entire star class is attending as well, including the main cast of characters from the game. Nox walks into the arena as well and immediately calls his attention. It looks like the assassin is insulted that Jiyama would dare come to challenge him with a girly kitchen knife. This guy's killing intent is no good, and it would be best that Jiyama tries his best to avoid provoking him. So naturally, Jiyama taunts him even more, by telling him that a true master never blames their equipment. Nox pulls out his blade, an S-rank sword called the Two Hongrion Blades. On top of the powerful equipment, he also has one of the best auras in the game, the Blessing of the Crow. However, Jiyama has also come prepared with dual discount-grade kitchen knives. Truly, this will be a fight for the ages. The subspace barrier is deployed, and before it is even fully active, the two students leap at each other. Jiyama activates the Painless Blessing as he uncovers the two knives, which activates the Sword God's Blessing. The people in the stands watch in awe as they can barely see anything going on in the arena. This was supposed to be an easy match where a special admission student would get demolished by an accomplished assassin, but with how fast the two of them are going, the students can't even keep track of what's going on. The students from Star Class are also surprised by how interesting this fight has suddenly gotten, especially Abel, who can't believe that the person she labeled as weak has such fighting prowess. Their swords continue to clash, and Jiyama is effortlessly dodging all of Nox's attacks. The assassin gets frustrated and launches another attack that's so fast, it creates 3 after images of him. Somehow though, despite the attacks hitting Jiyama head-on, he still manages to come out of it completely unscathed. The students watching are praising Nox's strength and speed, and they see this battle as Jiyama running away from every attack. But Abel knows the truth that no one else can see. Only those who can clearly see the match will understand what's happening. Somehow Giamma is perfectly dodging every single one of Nox's attacks, almost like he's not even trying to fight. Meanwhile, Nox is getting even more agitated, since he even used his Blessing of the Crow, thinking that it would be enough to annihilate him, but Giamma somehow managed to dodge everything like it was nothing. Now that Nox has seen for himself how skilled Giamma is, he decides to be more cautious and aim for a powerful strike that can slice through a wide area in just one go. Giamma suddenly drops the sashimi knife that he brought with him and holds the rosy blade that was given to him by Chloe. Just looking at the confidence in his stance makes Nox even angrier, and he doesn't think a nobody like Giamma should have the nerve to act like a big shot. As Giamma charges his attack, Nox also activates a powerful attack aimed to take out our MC with a single strike. Before he can even move though, Giamma goes on the offensive, and in a flash, the match is decided. Giamma wanted to live a comfortable life, and to achieve that, he stuck to the rules and tried not to stand out as much as possible. Now he has given his body up to the sword god, with the sole aim of cutting Nox up so cleanly that he wouldn't even be able to see if he was cut at all. The whole crowd falls deadly silent as Nox's arm, still holding one of his blades, flies through the air and falls limply to the ground. This is the beginning of Kang Giamma's origin, and it's the moment he says goodbye to his peaceful future. Giamma turns around and finishes the job, slicing Nox cleanly into pieces and officially ending the battle. The subspace barrier gets turned off, and the crowd is still in stunned silence, and Nox tries to catch his breath with his arms on the floor. Giamma puts his blade back in its hilt as the announcer declares him the winner of the match. Giamma isn't shocked that the crowd can't even bring themselves to cheer. He showed incredible power out of nowhere, all with a knife that was made for gutting fish. Despite the strength that he has, he still feels that cutting a person is just way too unpleasant. The only consolation they have is that both the Mao brothers and Nox were in the subspace when they fought, so he wasn't really killing people. Nox still tries to catch his breath on the ground, and Giamma can't help but admire the man. He's just as strong as Chloe described, and he has an incredible battle sense that has been honed through experience. However, anyone would be able to sense his intentions through his killing intent. The announcer repeats that Giamma won the duel, and it looks like this is enough to snap everyone out of their daze, and the arena is filled with cheering and shock that a first-year special admission student took down a sophomore. Giamma's peaceful, unassuming life is officially over, but this is the path he chose. Now that things have come to this, he just has to endure it with sheer will and grit. Even by the next day, people are still talking about the duel between the first and second year. In the star class, Abel stares out the window as she thinks about the student that has completely filled her mind recently. Because of the duel, his name follows her everywhere she goes now, and it's almost as if he's the only one everyone is talking about. When she saw it, she couldn't believe it either, but at that moment, he had such incredible swordsmanship while only using 2 kitchen knives. Watching his mastery of the blade has made her feel almost hopelessly naive for thinking that she was skilled at using a sword. In fact, he was so good that she's sure that he was the top student her grandfather was keeping as a secret from her. That makes her even more frustrated since she talked to him as if he was weak when he was actually stronger than her. Her loud annoyance is enough to wake up her seat partner, Rachel. She apologizes to her friend, but Rachel can immediately tell that something is seriously bothering Abel. The blue-haired girl tries to play it off by saying that she's frustrated because she hasn't been able to work out recently, but Rachel can immediately see through all of that. She tries some guesses to see what might be bothering Abel, and hits the nail on the head when she mentions that it might be boy trouble. Rachel breaks out in uninhibited laughter at the thought that Lady Abel would be interested in romance. All the while, Abel tries to convince her friend that it really isn't what she thinks it is. Rachel ignores her and shifts her focus to figuring out what man has gotten her dear friend so flustered. She runs through the list of options, starting with Leon, the class star with a handsome face, but Abel is so deadpan at the mention of that idea that it's obviously not him. Then that leaves only one option, the special student from the duel yesterday that shocked the entire school with his strength. Again, Abel freezes and isn't able to outright deny it, which is all the information that Rachel needs. Immediately, she grabs Rachel's hand and drags her to the Tiger class to meet the boy that has been on everyone's mind. The two of them barge into Tiger class with Abel reluctantly following along with her friend. Everyone in the class freezes in shock as the two school beauties make their way through the class. Rachel stands on a desk, looking for her target, but someone tries to come and scold her for suddenly leaping on another student's seat. She's able to completely confuse him by showing off how pretty she is, and Abel can only hold her head in embarrassment at her friend's actions. Eventually, she finds Giamma sleeping on his desk while Chloe fawns over him. Rachel at first mistakes Chloe for his girlfriend, but that doesn't matter to her, and it only makes this whole thing more fun. She walks up to Giamma and blows air lovingly into his ear, which shocks both Abel and Chloe. Then as he slowly wakes up, she sits down on his desk with a flirty look on her face and asks him for his name. Giamma already knows who she is though, and he's not excited to see another one of the game's heroines in front of him all of a sudden. She leans her finger closer and pokes Giamma on the face, complimenting his looks, while he just stares at her, shocked. He has no idea what's going on, but his intuition is screaming at him that this entire situation is dangerous. Suddenly, the hand that Rachel was about to use to poke Giamma is grabbed by a very angry-looking Chloe. Chloe demands to know what Rachel thinks she's doing, but her anger and murderous intent only amuse Rachel. It looks like Giamma's danger instincts were warning him about Chloe. Her personality has completely flipped as she spawns a box cutter from the yandere pocket dimension. If a knife fight breaks out in the classroom, it could spark some serious problems for him down the line. This is a combination he has never seen in the game before, and he can only wonder why this is happening all of a sudden. Abel comes in and tries to drag her friend out of the situation, especially since this isn't even their classroom, but Rachel won't budge. She claims that she's only here to say hello, and then, as if to pour salt in the wound, she places a hand on Chloe's head and tells her that she's not supposed to interrupt when adults are talking. That only makes Chloe even more angry, and she opens up the box cutter and prepares to strike. Giamma and Abel watch in shock as Chloe tries to stab Rachel, but her hand is easily grabbed by the much stronger girl. At this point, she's just pointlessly provoking Chloe into a fight, and Abel yells at her once again to stop what she's doing before something bad happens. Rachel frowns and quickly tosses Chloe away like paper, but Chloe is able to catch herself before falling, causing all the boys in class to scream out in joy at the building cat fight. Giamma is more annoyed than anything at the weird build-up happening in front of him. Then Rachel activates her blessing that's built from the foundation of her clan, the clan of the Spear Saint. In her clan, they believe that skills are useless when faced with overwhelming strength, and they believe that brute force triumphs over all else. That's the same motto that Rachel Demira, the niece of the Spear Saint, believes in as well. She bluntly asks Giamma if Chloe is her girlfriend, and our MC doesn't hesitate in saying no, and that causes Chloe's aggression to momentarily turn to him. He clarifies that she's just a friend, and Rachel seems to get even more interested in the whole ordeal. Meanwhile, Giamma is still trying to figure out just what in the world this whole situation is about. Now that he's more awake and has a chance to look around, he finally notices Abel, who looks just as frazzled as he was not too long ago. He cuts straight to the point and asks why the two of them came looking for him, and Rachel says it's because Abel was interested in him and wanted to see his face. Abel yells that her accusations are definitely not true, and it's Rachel that practically dragged her there. Rachel thought that Abel genuinely wanted to see him because she followed her to the tiger class. As the entire class's attention turns to her, she tries to shyly explain that there was a misunderstanding, but now Giamma just wants them to leave. He tells that to them bluntly, and that shocks the two girls, and Rachel can barely hold back her laughter. That makes her even more interested in Giamma, and she likes interesting guys. She tries inviting him over to her dorm room after class to do some ungodly things together, and that's the last straw for Chloe. She yells for Rachel to get away from her Giamma right this moment, and Rachel tries to mock her again, but Abel has had enough. Even she can barely hold back her anger at Rachel's flirting. Sensing that things might be getting too far, Rachel finally backs off, but not before telling Giamma that she'll see him later, which he quickly refuses and tells her not to come back. The two girls finally leave the class, and Giamma immediately goes back to sleep while Chloe rushes to check up on him. No one notices Abel pausing for a moment to stare longingly at Giamma before walking away. Abel and Chloe continue their walk back to their class, and Rachel can't get over just how impressed she was by Giamma's attitude. It's one thing to be cold, but from his hollow eyes, Rachel could faintly tell that there was an underlying subtle feeling that she could get her throat cut if she continued poking him like that. She was just curious about him, but he went far beyond her expectations and actually gave her chills. From the little she could see, she can already tell that he's easily a step above all the style with no substance students that are all over the star class. Her clan pulls no punches when it comes to getting betrothed to the most outstanding warriors, and in a way, he just might be a precious resource that she wouldn't want to let go of. Rachel turns around suddenly and apologizes to Abel. Abel, on the other hand, feels like she should apologize to the students of Tiger Class for the scene she made, but that's not what Rachel meant. She's apologizing about Kang Giamma because going forward, she's not going to yield now that she's interested in him. Elsewhere, in the school's clinic, Nox pulls himself angrily through the halls, with only the thought of killing Giamma in his mind. He has lived his entire life without knowing defeat, constantly being called the auditory genius. Now someone has come and defeated him with nothing but kitchen knives. Just the thought of Giamma's face pisses him off to an outstanding degree. If he has to, he will call the power of his entire clan just to cut off Giamma's head, and then once he kills our MC, he will get Chloe back. Chloe has the potential to become similar if not greater than him, and he won't let some random special admissions nobody take her away from him. All he has to do is call on the power of his clan to strike, and then they will show him. At least that's what should have happened. But the same Giamma that he has been relentlessly plotting to kill sits calmly in his clinic room, eating an apple. Before then, though, while the class was in session, Giamma watched Chloe worriedly. The two girls have left, but Chloe is very clearly still upset, even though she was the one who pulled the blade out first. As she's having her psychotic thoughts, Giamma goes over to her in hopes of calming her down. Even though he can probably talk her out of whatever mental break she's about to have, he still wished she'd at least put the box cutter down when talking to him. He asks her about how Nox is doing, and she sadly tells him that her brother is in the academy's medical ward. That's odd though, since people can't actually get injured in the subspace, so he shouldn't have any need for medical attention. The last Chloe heard, he was admitted into the ward despite having no injuries. But it should be fine, and there shouldn't be any reason for Giamma to worry. Giamma can't help but think about it though. Even though he was sliced up in the subspace, Nox isn't the kind of person that'd be weak enough to be traumatized from that. To make sure that nothing else happens, he has to check in on Nox, and to do that, he asks Chloe to tell him where Nox's room is. To sweeten the deal, he even pats her head, which is another tip he got from the How to Handle Yandere type series. That's how we got to where we are today, as Giamma stares down Nox, who is still surprised to see our MC in his room. Giamma comments on the room and how the auditories must be loaded with cash for them to get a hospital room this fancy for just one person. Before Nox can ask Giamma how he got into this room in the first place, our MC picks up a skinning knife from the bedside counter, and Nox momentarily goes on guard, wondering if Giamma wants to finish what he started. However, instead, Giamma simply picks up another apple and cleanly peels the skin off before placing it right back on the table. Then Giamma gets up and walks right past Nox, advising him to take fruits and vegetables for his health. That pisses Nox off even more, and the assassin reveals a knife hidden under his sleeve, ready to stab Giamma while he's least expecting it. But as if predicting this, Giamma warns him that if he ever has ideas of getting any sort of revenge, then he will be cut up along with the entirety of Auditore. With that, Giamma slams the door shut as he leaves, and the force is harsh enough to turn the apple that he cleanly peeled into slices, revealing that he cut it up so fast that Nox didn't even notice. Giamma walks out of the medical unit with his mission hopefully accomplished. Now Nox is nothing more than a candle that can be extinguished at any time, and his will has been totally destroyed. This is all thanks to Giamma's bravado-filled intimidation, which he hopes doesn't come back to bite him. After all, the auditories are an incredible group of assassins, and there's no way that he can take on an entire clan with just 30 seconds of pain neutralizer. Although he should be able to take out 10 people in 30 seconds, the rest of the clan is an entirely different case. And that's only in the worst case scenario anyways. Giamma would love to avoid killing as much as he can. As he walks under the moonlight back to his dorm room, he feels like he's standing in the eye of a storm in a weird way. He's starting to get used to this new, crazy life of his. As long as Nox doesn't stir up any trouble, then he doesn't have to worry about things getting too insane. But he has another problem to deal with, and that's the girl that he wanted to avoid the most, Rachel. In the original game, she approaches the main character first, and gets attached to the main heroine Abel. Now that she has decided to approach him instead, this is a clear sign that the timeline has changed drastically. He also needs to prepare for the midterms, and for once, he's going to have to take things seriously so that he can get that reward. The test will need a group of 5 students to subdue a demonic monster. The 5 students will be picked regardless of class, and this test is meant to emphasize teamwork. Individual prowess is definitely important, but having faith in your comrades is certainly more important on the battlefield. The best thing a weak student can do in this situation is find the right teammates and hope to be carried by them. Although it's not like the monsters are much of an issue anyways. The monsters that they will be hunting in this test are D-rank demonic monster mermen. Giamma remembers them looking really gross in the game, which means facing them in real life is going to be even more disgusting. If they were mermaids, then they would at least be more attractive to look at, but mermen are just going to be gross. But mermaids are considered demonic humans, and they are the main force of the demon army, meaning that they are way more powerful. Compared to demonic humans, demonic monsters are nothing more than just guard dogs or pets. Fortunately, only mermen should be on the island, meaning that students don't have to deal with demonic humans. It's already been a month since Chiyama came to this school, and this is the first night that he has felt a bit of peace. It's been 700 years since the humans and the demons swore a truce, and just like how human history isn't without war, there have been a few disputes between the humans and the demons, both big and small. An example is half a century ago when Vasmon, the commander of the 6th Legion, claimed that he would revive the commander of the 1st Legion. That decision caused an entire week of battles that bathed the city in blood. In the end, humanity emerged victorious, and the 7 heroes were born. Although from those heroes, 3 sacrifices were made, and neither faction wanted to escalate things further. Other than that, peace has continued to this day, but Chiyama wonders if this is really peace. The more he thinks about it, the one who sealed the 1st Legion commander alone 700 years ago must have been a real beast. The 6th commander took 7 people together to bring down, and even then, there were deaths among their group. And now, they only have 3 years before the second human-demon war begins, and this time, the war will include the Demon King. It's terrifying to think about that future, but thinking won't change anything. What Chiyama needs to do now is to focus on the upcoming midterms. The first thing he needs to do is find teammates, but that's easier said than done since he has no friends. Right now, though, he's the most famous student in the academy, and he can probably use that to his advantage in hopes of solving the problem. There's no way he can live 3 years under the radar, so Chiyama decides to change his motto for the time being. He will no longer try to live quietly, but still try to live comfortably. Now he needs to try his best to get people to join his group. However, a week later, he's still completely alone. Not a single person invited him to join their group. In the end, they might all just be scared of him. He turns around and glances at his class, and the only person alone like him is Chloe. Maybe she's been considered an outsider since the altercation with her brother and how he lost, or maybe because of how she acted when Rachel came around. Regardless of the reason, he approaches her and asks if she still hasn't found any cadets to partner up with. Just like him, she's still alone, and Chiyama is worried about her. After all, he's used to being alone, but she had some friends at least, and yet they are all gone. She claims that she will be alright as long as she has him. In any case, he offers her to partner up with him, so they can find 3 other people. With Chloe's capabilities, she will be a huge asset to him. He can only fight for 30 seconds, so she is like 30 soldiers packed in a cute bundle. The peace in the class is broken up as Rachel comes charging in, calling for Chiyama. He doesn't hide his disdain for seeing her again, and Chloe doesn't hide her bloodlust either as she pulls out a box cutter. Rachel continues to bother him, even falling over on his desk, and then she asks him if he has found any groups to take the test with. Since she's clearly not listening to him, he answers her question, and the fact that he doesn't have a group yet is perfect for her as she invites him to her group. Chiyama is suspicious of the sudden offer since there is definitely a huge line of other students available to join her group, so why would she come for him specifically? She tells him plainly that he seems more fun to do the test with than any of the other students in her class. Chiyama then tells her that he's already in a team with Chloe, but that's alright too since Rachel's group has 2 spots left. Chiyama is still suspicious of the whole thing since this is a bigger risk for Rachel. Doing something like this could risk her grades if they underperform for the island test. He glances at Chloe and she begrudgingly nods, agreeing to join the group. With nothing holding him back anymore, he tells her that he will join, and Rachel immediately opens her phone to test someone after telling him that he can't back out. Then Chiyama asks who the other members of the group are, and the first person she mentioned is none other than Leon. Not just any Leon, the counterfeit protagonist of this world, and the one person Chiyama wants to interact with the least. Chiyama can't help wondering what crimes he committed in his past life that gave him such terrible luck. Like yeah, he spent 30 years wielding a knife, but that was because of his job. He's getting involved with the heroines for some unknown reason, and even though he tried his best not to stand out, he's still getting intertwined in the main story. The heroines at least are eye candy for him, and it's not so bad getting involved with pretty girls. The real problem is Leon Van Reinhardt. He's the main character, and interacting with him will definitely turn the main plot on its head. Right now, Chiyama has no clue how things will pan out in the future, but he's sure that everything will be his fault in one way or another. He even tried to see if he could change his group, but Rachel already put his name down in the application before talking to him. This is the first time in his life he has wanted to cut down a girl so badly. And then, of course, there's the biggest issue in the yandere that he shares a class with. And speaking of the devil, she comes up right beside him to ask how he's doing since he has looked petrified ever since Rachel left. He tells her that he was just a bit overwhelmed thinking about taking the exam with Star Class cadets. Chloe tells him that no one is stronger than him in Star Class, and he weakly thanks her. He did choose to team up with Chloe, so he can't take the exam without her in good conscience. In fact, thinking about it more rationally, there aren't better people for him to take the test with. This could turn out to be a good thing if he wasn't so pessimistic about it. He asks Chloe when and where they are supposed to have their first group meeting, and she tells him that it's at a cafe on campus. It's nearly time for them to meet up, so he suggests that they start heading there now. They get there first, and both he and Chloe order drinks for themselves. Chloe gets a delicious avocado smoothie for herself, and Giamma can't help but watch her in envy as he thinks about how expensive a single cup of that thing is. Then he takes a sip of his cheap espresso and almost has a seizure at how horrible it tastes. Since this cafe is an outside company, the faculty cards don't work, so for the first time, he's forced to use his own money. As he rethinks his life choices, his phone buzzes with a message from Rachel. She tells him that she's close by, and not long after she walks into the booth with Leon and someone else close behind her. Leon and Giamma make contact for the first time, and then Giamma glances at the person beside him. The first impression he can get from the guy is that he must be some sort of delinquent. Leon is the first of the guys to introduce himself with a hand outstretched to our MC. Giamma takes it in a handshake, and Leon compliments him on the battle he had in the subspace a few days earlier. Just from the way he talks, Giamma can tell that he's a perfect blend of intelligence and class. Then they all sit down, and Rachel suggests that they do proper introductions. Leon goes first and introduces himself as the group's leader and a student of Star Class. He ended up becoming the leader of their group somehow, and he seems genuine when he says that he looks forward to working with them all. The next to introduce herself is Rachel, but everyone there already knows her, so she passes the baton to the person sitting beside her. His name is Speed Weapon, and he's also a student of Star Class. His introduction is short and straight to the point, but Giamma is more interested in his unusual name. Chloe goes next and introduces herself as a student from Wolf Class, who made it into the group thanks to Giamma. Rachel mocks her for the way she calls Giamma Jiam-kun instead, and the two of them have a stare-off for a moment before Chloe calms herself down with a sigh and ends her introduction. Finally, Giamma introduces himself, and his introduction is even shorter and more straight to the point than Speedwagon, giving only his name and his class. The others acknowledge the awkwardly short intro, and Leon brings out a laptop so they can discuss the main topic of the meeting. He presses a button on the computer, and a holographic map of the region they will be taking the exam on is displayed. The site is called Scopuli Island, and they will be teleported to a designated location in the island through a subspace. However, only the gate will be a subspace, meaning that once they make it to the island, their experiences will be real, and they can actually be injured by the demonic beasts. The assigned area for their group is the northeastern coast, and 3 groups, including theirs, will be hunting for mermen in the area. There is a limited amount of mermen in the area, so the objective of the exam is to hunt as many mermen as the limit will allow. With the information passed across, Leon ends the presentation and asks for questions from his group. Speedwagon goes first and asks if there are any risks besides the mermen on the island. The instructors have already done research on the island in advance to ensure that there will be no monsters or demons on the island besides the mermen. Then Chloe asks if other groups can ambush and battle each other, much to the shock of the rest of her groupmates. Leon calmly assures her that the exam's objective is strictly to exterminate demonic beasts, so conflict between groups would lead to a disqualification. That question must have been part of her habits as an assassin. With no other questions from the group, Leon disbands them and tells them to prepare themselves for the midterms until they meet again the next day for another discussion. The other cadets exit the cafe, leaving Giamma alone with Leon. The atmosphere is awkward, so Giamma moves to hurry up and leave, but Leon suddenly calls out to him. The faux MC asks Giamma where he came from. Giamma pauses and takes a moment to ponder about the strange question from Leon. He heard a similar question before, but this question coming from Leon is fundamentally different. Leon also looks deadly serious while asking this question, and Giamma can't tell what he's thinking. He could have asked that question earlier while they were introducing themselves, but Leon specifically chose to ask that question after everyone had left. After noticing the long silence, Leon apologizes for springing that kind of question out of nowhere and says that he can't help but feel like Giamma is similar to him. While it's true that this world's official language is Korean due to where the game was made, that doesn't mean that other cultures don't exist. Anyone can tell just from a glance that Giamma is Korean, so it's for Leon to ask where he's from and say that they are similar. With still more silence from Giamma, who is struggling to comprehend this weird conversation, Leon tells him to pretend like he didn't hear anything before getting up and leaving the cafe. Giamma stops him and throws the question back at Leon, asking him where he came from. It was a reflex response, and Giamma regrets it immediately, but he knows that he won't be able to sleep tonight if he doesn't get an answer. Leon calmly takes Giamma's hand and tells our MC that he's from Germany. Without another word, he leaves, and Giamma can't help but wonder what is up with Leon all of a sudden. At that moment, when Leon first asked the question, Giamma wondered if the main character of this game came from another world as well. It's outlandish to think about, but it's also a very real possibility. There's no rule saying that only one person can be dragged into this video game after all, and possessing the main character is more probable than possessing an extra. Giamma glances down at the knife of his table and has an idea. When the blessing of the sword god activates, his senses are strangely heightened. Maybe activating the blessing might give him some answers. He picks up the knife and removes the cover, and a message comes into his mind, just as he had hoped. It confirms that Leon really is from this world. This voice is similar to when he was fighting Chloe. When he activates the blessing of the sword god, he can faintly hear a voice. However, thinking about it gives him a migraine that even bypasses the painless blessing. Regardless, the Leon that he met today is definitely the Leon that he played in the game, and no actor could replicate Leon so perfectly. It's weird that Leon would ask him which country he came from out of nowhere, but then the claim that the two of them are similar is also quite concerning. He heads over to a wiki page, but there is no information about Leon in this world. Things are getting weird, and Giamma decides that this is the last time he will be involved with Leon. If something like this happens again, he can just go and see Medea about it, while ignoring her attempts to run away with him. Giamma is also surprised by how calm he has managed to be despite the situations that have been unfolding recently. Maybe this is also an influence of his blessings. He takes a look at his status screen, and as usual, it looks like he's making smooth progress. His mental fortitude and armament are the same, but his physical fortitude has increased thanks to the training that he has been doing. His armament will also probably increase when he gets Murasame from the midterm exams. The only thing he's not sure of is the assimilation rate. It has gone up a lot, and it looks like it will soon unlock something special for him. Maybe it's related to what he has done so far. It's still annoying that he doesn't know what it is, and it's not like he can ask someone else either. At the bottom of the status screen though, there's something new. His blessing of painlessness has increased by 10 seconds, meaning that he can now use his blessing for 40 seconds. It looks like after so much time, his labors have finally borne fruit. As the days go by and the groups continue to meet up to discuss their battle strategy for the exam, Giamma continues to train and hone his skills, until finally, the day of the exam arrives. All the groups stand in front of the subspace gate, and Giamma can tell that it has a completely different vibe than the training grounds subspace. The rest of his team arrives as well, and they seem just as excited as he is. In their previous meetings, they decided on which roles each person will take in their team. Rachel will lead the front as the main damage dealer, while Leon takes a center role as the leader to keep everyone together. Speed Weapon will be behind Leon as a support while Chloe works with Rachel as a secondary damage dealer. Finally, Giamma will take up the rear guard behind everyone else, making up a solid team. Giamma takes a second to look at all their equipment and how powerful it is. Rachel has S-rank gear called the Vermilion Phoenix Halberd, and although Leon doesn't have Balmung yet, he still has a powerful sword. Lastly, Speed Weapon's gear is a recorder. I didn't know the support also provided musical entertainment. Rachel assures him that the recorder is one of the few S-rank equipment that provides healing, and even Giamma knows that a healing S-rank armament is ridiculously hard to get. That kind of equipment is incredible to own, and Giamma gets closer to inspect it, much to Speed Weapon's surprise. Their chat is cut short as a voice comes on the intercom to announce that the first-year midterms are about to start. The instructor of Wolf Class Lee Wanbin comes over to talk to the students. They already have a good grasp of the rules, so he keeps their discussion brief. He tells them to not be shy of running away when things get hectic. There's no reason to risk their lives for extra credit. If they are injured or wish to surrender, they can just call for the instructor in charge. Now that the exam is officially about to start, Leon tells them to do their best and try not to be nervous. Chloe seems anxious, and Giamma asks what is wrong. She tells him that she remembers the fact that mermaids can appear on the island, but Giamma assures her again that the instructors have already confirmed that everything is clear. Chloe tries to take his word for it, but she can't help being nervous. Back in Sicily, where she grew up, mermaids were often sighted, and they were known to cause large amounts of damage. Humans now have a truce with demonic beings, so they are rarely seen outside of dungeons, but the fact that these rumors have persisted even though the truce means that the conditions of where mermaids appear have yet to be fully confirmed. He places a hand on her head to calm her down as the teachers call for the cadets to step through the gate. She smiles and decides to place her belief in Giamma. Much later, she hears Giamma's voice calling for her through a haze in her mind. It looks like she lost focus for a moment, and now things have turned on their head. When she opens her eyes, she sees Giamma and the others standing in front of something large and powerful. Rachel asks Speedweapon if he has been able to contact an instructor in charge, but since they are in a cave, he doesn't have a connection on his phone. Meanwhile, someone lays on the ground, bleeding and clearly in danger, and then in front of them is the main cause of this sudden chaos. A mermaid. Let's go back a bit before our group found themselves in this terrible situation. As soon as they arrived on Scopuli Island, the first major problem they all faced was motion sickness from passing through the gate. The only person who seems alright is Giamma, who tells them that he doesn't suffer from motion sickness. Not long after that, they had their first encounter with a merman. It stared at them in surprise for a moment before scurrying away. As disgusting as they look, they are way smaller than Giamma expected. Leon confirms that the one they saw is too small to give them any points. To find the adult merman, the group has to head to their assigned location. Chloe goes ahead of them to scout the location, and the group follows along at a slower pace. Eventually, they make it to their location, and Chloe returns from her scouting trip to report what she's seen. She tells them that there is a cave about 500 meters ahead of them, and she leads them to it. Before they even enter the dark and ominous-looking cave, there are already dozens of eyes staring at them. Leon can tell that there are about 50 to 60 mermen in the cave, and they are all gathered around a campfire. Defeating that many mermen will definitely guarantee them first place in the midterms, but the group has to consider their safety before anything else. Entering that cave will cut off their internet and make contacting an instructor difficult. It's a high-risk, high-reward decision, and it all depends on their group leader, Leon. Before they came to this island, he took great care in determining what role every member of the team will play. So now, it's time for him to lead them to victory again. In a moment, Leon made his decision and sent out Rachel to start the attack. Rachel leans back and sends a golden spear shooting into the cave. The spear lands right on top of the campfire, putting it out and shocking all the mermen. Before they can turn to see where it came from, Rachel is right on top of them, and in a second, several mermen heads go flying. Speedweapon goes next, focusing his power to buff Rachel's skills, making it easier for her to pick them off one by one. Giamma can't help letting out a gasp of awe at how powerful Rachel is. That doesn't go unnoticed by Chloe, and the yandere pulls out her katana and activates her blessing to take on the fishman as well. She immediately rushes to catch up to Rachel's number, taking out more and more mermen while the two of them rush towards each other. They aren't slowing down, even as they continue to get closer and closer to each other, and Giamma gets worried that they have no intention of slowing down at all. They get within inches of each other before finally turning and taking out the last merman that was rushing towards them both. Then they step away from each other and continue taking out the others while Giamma breathes a sigh of relief. In the end, he was worried about both of them for nothing, and eventually, with their combined efforts, all 60 mermen were slain. It looks like they are done here, and Leon suggests that they go somewhere else to continue the exam. That kind of determination and leadership is what makes the blonde MC the heart of their team. That further proves to Giamma that Leon really is the true MC of the game. There's no way anyone would be able to replicate these qualities of a hero. As Jaome's thoughts continue to wander, he takes his eyes off Leon for a moment. He looks back up just in time to see the blonde hero fall to the ground after taking a fatal blow to the stomach. The others stare in shock as something powerful rises from the pool of dead mermen behind Giamma. It's a demonoid mermaid, the exact monster that Chloe feared would show up unannounced on the island. Giamma had a feeling that things were going way too smoothly for them. Now the question is whether they should run or stand and fight. There's no telling if they will even be able to get to safety while looking after an injured Leon. Rachel tells Speedweapon to call the instructors and inform them that a mermaid appeared, but just as Giamma feared, the cave is messing with their internet access, and there is no way to contact the instructor. Everyone is panicking, and it looks like Giamma is the only person not panicking at the moment. With Leon down for the count, there's only one person that can take the lead in this situation. He steps up and starts giving orders to his teammates. He tells Rachel to keep the mermen away from them no matter what. Then he orders Speedweapon to dump as many healing blessings as he can on Leon. Finally, he calls Chloe, who seems to have zoned out, and he tells her to evacuate the other cadets and tells the instructors what's going on. It takes a moment for his words to sink in, but eventually, she heads off to do what he says. Now that everyone has been given proper instructions, Giamma steps up to the mermaid, much to the shock of the others. He tells Rachel and Weapon that he's leaving the mermen to them. As for the mermaid, cutting up bitfish has always been his specialty, so it's only fair that it goes to him. Demons can use a unique power similar to a human's blessings. It's called magic, and it's a power that was strong enough to take down the protagonist in just one hit. That's the difference in strength between humans and demons. Giamma has the blessing of the sword god, but that doesn't guarantee that he will survive this battle. Even in the original game, it was impossible to take down a magic-utilizing demon without a party, and yet here he is, about to solo a boss that usually requires a full-scale raid. In other words, Giamma is in deep shit, but there's no way he can back out of this now. It should take Chloe about 10 minutes to find help and come back. Despite that, Giamma has only 40 seconds to take this overgrown fish down before he meets a worse fate than the main character. Rachel struggles to keep the merman away while Speed Weapon focuses all his power on healing Leon. The wound is deep, but it's recovering regardless. Despite the daunting task in front of him, he can't help but focus his attention on Giamma. Just looking at the mermaid is making Super Weapon's bones shiver, and yet Giamma wants to fight it all by himself. The demon strikes first, launching the same laser attack that took out Leon. Giamma dodges the attack and rushes in with his knife to close the distance. The mermaid seems to primarily use long-distance attacks with water magic properties. Giamma doesn't know much about magic, but he does know that this demon is just a fish with flesh and bones. All he has to do to come out on top is dive in and cut it. He jumps close to the demon and slices it, but it dodges out of the way and heads for Speed Weapon instead. Before it can get to him, Giamma comes around and manages to cut off one of the monster's fins, causing it to scream out in pain. The cut was way too shallow, and our MC goes in for another attack, but it quickly dodges away and dissolves into water. Since the mermaid went after Speed Weapon, it looks like she is deliberately going after the ones who are injured. Leon is somewhat healed now, and Speed Weapon calls out for Giamma. It looks like he's alright, and Giamma takes a moment to check on him before rushing off to fight the mermaid again. In Speed Weapon's eyes, Giamma is really cool. During one of their many meetings, Speed Weapon talked about how he looked up to heroes that sacrificed themselves for the sake of others. So far, since Speed Weapon entered the school, he hasn't seen anyone that matches the title of a hero. That's why he entered a group with Rachel, in hopes of finding the hero he was looking for in Leon. He even told Giamma frankly that he is far from a hero in Speed Weapon's eyes. And yet now, in this crazy situation, the one that's stepping up and risking their life is Giamma himself. The mermaid continues the attack, launching fish-shaped magic blasts that Giamma skillfully dodges. However, this time, instead of just zooming past him, they turn around and follow him. The mermaid can control these attacks, and they chase Giamma around the cave. With Giamma distracted, the demon tries again to attack Speed Weapon. Giamma gets there just in time to cut down the monster before it can launch the attack, but it's shallow again. He can't take it down with small cuts. If he wants to kill this demon once and for all, Giamma is going to need to stab it as deeply as he can. The mermaid sends another blast at Giamma, but this time, he manages to dodge, causing the blast to break through the top of the cave, shooting into the sky. The attack is so powerful that cadets around the mountain are able to see it, and they hear a loud roar following it as well. On top of that, it also started raining. The instructor with one of the groups suggests that they take the wounded and move quickly before the rain starts to affect them. Back in the cave, the mermen start to retreat, and the cadets have a moment of rest. The mermaid was crushed under the debris from the cave breaking open, but Giamma is sure that she isn't dead. Just as he suspects, the mermaid breaks through the rocks piled on top of her and rushes towards the students. This whole time, Giamma hasn't been able to fight properly because he has been conscious of the injured Leon. Now that the mermen have retreated, he tells Rachel to take care of Speed Weapon and Leon for him. Speed Weapon still can't believe that Giamma is taking on a demon by himself. He thought our MC was a madman before, but now he might just be witnessing the birth of a legend. Meanwhile, Giamma is just happy that he can finally focus now that he doesn't have to worry about his teammates. He only has 10 seconds left of the painless blessing, and he has to make up for lost time if he doesn't want to die. Giamma and the mermaid stare each other down for a moment, before rushing in for the final clash. Elsewhere, Chloe dashes through the forest as fast as she can, looking for anyone to help her. She's tired, but she knows she can't stop running unless everyone she left behind will be in danger. Her body hurts incredibly bad, but the more she feels like stopping, the more she thinks about Giamma, and the fact that he's in the cave, fighting that monster on his own for their sake. Giamma really is the strongest person she has ever met in her life. He clearly doesn't like fighting and tries to avoid drawing his blade whenever possible. The only time he stands to fight is when there is really no other choice. Since Giamma made the best decision fighting that mermaid, she knows she has to do her best to get help. But she can't help feeling that if she was just a little stronger, then maybe she would have been able to help him somehow. Behind her, a loud blast tears the side of the cave apart, and she knows that it's the sound of Giamma and the mermaid fighting. In her worry, she trips off a vine and almost falls, but manages to catch herself on the ground and keeps running. She can't stop or fall until she has found someone to help. As she continues to run, she senses something ahead of her. She can't send it clearly since her head is in a mess, but her first thought is that they must be mermen. She draws her sword to defend herself and unleashes a blow towards the closest one to her, but surprisingly, the merman blocks with their own sword. That's because it isn't a merman, it's Abel. As soon as she realizes that she has finally found another person, Chloe stops moving and collapses to the ground. Abel's teammates get suspicious and start to suspect that there is some sort of ambush in the area. Meanwhile, Chloe weakly tries to tell them that they should go and help Giamma. Luckily for her, Abel remembers her face from when she and Rachel went to Giamma's class. Back in the cave, Speedweapon is left in complete awe at what he's witnessing. He wonders if there will ever be a day as astonishing as this ever again. The way Giamma fights seems like a skilled swordsman handling a live fish on a chopping board with skill. At this point, this whole thing is beyond just fighting a demonoid. Giamma is completely overwhelming it. This scene unfolding right is definitely something that will be etched in his memory for the rest of his life. Even Rachel, who's the successor of the Spear clan and grew up among strong people, clearly hasn't seen this caliber of skill before. Despite that, she's the first to push him out of the way when a stray attack comes towards them. Speedweapon nearly forgot where he was because of how intense the sight was. Giamma's opponent is a demon that uses magic. A blade against magic isn't a good matchup to begin with, even if our MC has the upper hand right now. If the demon uses magic that can't be countered, then Giamma will be in danger. As soon as Speedweapon has that thought, as if on cue, the mermaid raises its hands in the air and calls a different magic attack called Needle Squall. The rain around them starts to crystallize and freeze and everything halts for a moment. Then the mermaid drops its hand and all the sharp crystallized raindrops fall towards Giamma. He dodges some and parries the rest, but they are too hard for his knife. The blade starts to break apart as he fights with it. Instead of keeping the blade aside, Giamma tosses it at the mermaid. It cuts straight through the mermaid's side, leaving a gaping hole in its waist. Giamma then follows up with a final attack cutting through the mermaid's flesh with one powerful slash. Except the mermaid managed to dodge, and instead used the body of a merman to distract Giamma. Then it charges up a massive attack right in front of our MC. This one is way too close, and there is no possible way he can dodge it. Just before the attack hits and he starts to panic, his mind is suddenly teleported to a clear space. In that space, he sees a red line that indicates where he should cut, and he hears a voice telling him that if he can slice it, it will cut. Instead of dodging the attack, Giamma readjusts his grip on the knife and cuts through the magic instead. The cut causes a massive shockwave to push through the area, and by the time the smoke clears, Giamma stands over the lifeless body of the mermaid. The demon makes a few sounds in death and Giamma kicks it away, down into the pool that it came out from. Rachel and Speedweapon stare at the scene in front of them in shock. Somehow, a freshman defeated a demonoid alone. Suddenly, Giamma falls to his knees and starts coughing up blood. Rachel is the first to react, and she rushes over to him while Speedweapon checks on Leon. Thankfully, the protagonist is fine, but there are other sounds behind them and Speedweapon turns around thinking that the mermen that ran away have returned. Instead, it's Abel and her team, carrying an unconscious and injured Chloe. The first thing Abel notices is Rachel, who caresses an unconscious Giamma. The sight makes her angry for some reason, but she ignores it to look around. The rest of the team look like they all have one foot in the grave, and yet Leon seems completely fine. She informs them that she has contacted the academy, and they will be arriving in an hour to aid them. Now that help is on the way, she wants to know just what exactly happened. She tells Speedweapon to explain, but he's more frustrated by the academy and the instructors who claim that they thoroughly checked the island. He doesn't believe that they will believe him anyways, but he starts to tell them what he witnessed. Speedweapon gives Abel a basic rundown of what happened and how Giamma defeated the mermaid alone. Just like Speedweapon predicted, she can barely believe it. The tales that her grandfather told her when she was younger were more realistic than this. And yet, As ridiculous as the story is, the evidence around them proves that it's the truth. Why would they lie about this anyways? And yet, Abel still can't accept it. She's a descendant of the acclaimed hero Balor Joachim and his disciple Aaron Nibelung. Those are the roots that she has in her, and it has given her a special attribute since birth. Her bloodline has always been filled with promise and potential, and she put in incredible effort to make sure that she wouldn't be overshadowed by her roots. And yet, even with everything going in her favor and with how far she has managed to get, Kangjiyama continues to prove that there is a ridiculously large gap between their skills. Abel can't help feeling a mix of fear, dread, and admiration. She tells the healer in her group to try to heal Jiyama while they wait for the teachers. After getting a better look at him, she can see that he's tattered and at death's door, and yet, he fought a demonoid alone and came out victorious. Abel can't help but look at him in envy. Speed Weapon snaps her out of it and tells her that it probably would be best if they don't tell the instructors what happened here in detail. The Academy claims that they scouted the island beforehand, and yet a demonoid popped out of a cave that would be easily noticeable by cadets. There's some things that just don't add up in this whole story. Leon tries to cut straight to the point and asks Speed Weapon if he thinks that there is someone among the demon factions within the Academy. Leon tries to backtrack since that's not exactly what he meant, but they also can't completely rule out that possibility. It's undeniable that this cave isn't easy for cadets to miss, and as Speed Weapon said, if it weren't for Jiyama, then Leon's group would have been torn to shreds. There were definitely conflicts both large and small during the 700-year truce, but there was never a moment where the demons dared to touch the cadets of the Academy. There was also a clause in the truce stating that if an act like that were to happen, then it would be justification for war. Speed Weapon tries to pull them out of their thoughts and assures them that they are definitely blowing things out of proportion. It's not a bad thing to be wary of a possible spy in the Academy, but it's way too soon to jump to conclusions. For now, they need to make sure that their stories match up. If there really is a spy in the Academy, then Jiyama will definitely become a target once word gets around that he defeated a demonoid alone. Abel doesn't really agree with keeping things under wraps like this, but since Jiyama has worked so hard for their sake, and the group seems to unanimously agree with this decision, she suggests that they talk to her grandfather first. The cadets return to the school and Jiyama is taken to a hospital. He wakes up as the bright even sun shines on his face, and he's almost surprised that he's alive. The last thing he remembers is the mermaid shooting a magic sphere out right before it died. It wasn't an attack that he could dodge, but he just barely managed to see it. He used his sashimi knife to cut through a line and the magic severed into two halves before bursting. Looking back at it, the magic sphere was definitely water. On top of that, after activating the sword god's blessing, he felt something that he can't describe. He calls his blessing just to make sure and the screen pops up in front of him again. His mental fortitude has increased by 1, and that's mostly likely why he didn't get scared when he faced the mermaid. It also looks like his assimilation rate has increased enough for him to unlock the mysterious attribute. The next attribute will be unlocked when his assimilation rate reaches 15%. Maybe this strange unlockable is what allowed him to see the red line to cut with the mermaid. As he's thinking about his blessing, the door opens and a familiar figure dashes in. It's Medea, and she wastes no time wrapping Jiyama in a tight hug. She fusses over him as Jiyama tries his hardest to breathe through her death hug. She pulls away from him eventually and apologizes, but then reveals why she came here to see him. She opens up a dimensional pocket through her purse. She pulls out the reward from the pocket, and it's what he had been hoping to get from the midterm exam. The Murasame sword. The Murasame is a B-rank sword with high-level stats, and it's exactly what Jiyama was looking for. He stares at it in disbelief as Medea asks him if he likes it. She apologizes for giving it to him in this kind of situation since he should have gotten it officially. Meanwhile, someone lurks at the door, watching the whole interaction. Medea calls out to the person and tells them to just get in the room instead of stalking at the door like some kind of shy creep. Siegfried Nibelung clears his throat and walks through the door sheepishly to stand beside Medea. This interaction gives Jiyama a strange sense of déjà vu considering what happened when he first came to the Academy. He asks what exactly the Sword Emperor is doing here as well. Medea reveals that she heard what happened from his teammates. Then they both bow their heads and apologize on behalf of the whole Academy. They are to blame for everything that happened during the midterms. Because of their negligence, everyone who was there nearly lost their lives. Jiyama can't bring himself to speak as she continues to talk. She swears to him that they will uncover the truth behind the incident. Siegfried speaks up as well and thanks him for saving the cadets. Jiyama nervously scratches his cheek and meekly tells them that he did what he could. Medea continues and says that even though his actions were remarkable, they need to keep the incident under wraps. Medea is sure that the mastermind behind this incident is in the academy, and they have to keep things quiet if they don't want this leaking out to the public. Giamma understands and doesn't hold their decision against them. Medea smiles and says that sometimes Giamma acts like an old man trapped in a teenage boy's body. The two administrators leave the room and make their way back to the administrative block. As they walk through the halls, Medea asks her old friend if he remembers the day they met after enrolling in the school for the first time. Siegfried was laying on a bench and she told him to shove it. In response, Siegfried drew his sword without a word. Siegfried pretends not to remember anything, and Medea smiles slightly. The whole thing feels like it happened just yesterday, but it's already been 60 years since then. Yet, even with that, they haven't filled a tenth of Joaquin Academy's history. Back when they enrolled, the school was already ancient and filled to the brim with history. There were big and small incidents, but the academy nurtured and protected its cadets for 700 years. Suddenly the atmosphere changes and Medea's aura causes the surrounding windows to shatter. Before the midterms, she received reports that they had completed multiple preliminary surveys of the island. Even though it was rare, the Scopuli Island was known as a ground for mermaid sightings, so she took every precaution to make sure that nothing would happen to her precious students, and yet something terrible like this would happen under her watch. Siegfried places a calming hand on her shoulder, and she snaps out of it with an apologetic look. Then she immediately switches to fangirl mode as she thinks about how amazing Giamma is. The fact that he took a mermaid down all by himself is incredible, and she asks Siegfried what he thinks. Siegfried has seen natural-born talent countless times. He has seen many names hailed as the chosen ones of their era, only for them to lose sight of their light. In families of heroes that are desperate for glory and honor, the word genius is recklessly thrown around. When a child shows the slightest bit of promise, they are called a genius because of their bloodline. It's also a word that he forbade from being used to describe even his own granddaughter, Abel. But if it's Giamma whose talent is so unfathomable, then maybe the word genius can only apply to him. If he continues to accumulate experience, Siegfried wonders just how far he will go. Maybe Giamma could even reach the place that Siegfried could only dream of. Without answering her question, Siegfried walks past Medea, but not before advising her to stay put at the academy for now. She smiles and follows after him, and the two continue their small talk as they make their way through the halls. Later, Giamma is released from the hospital and he goes to attend class as usual. Just like the headmaster instructed, the fact that he took down a demonoid on Scopuli Island seems to have been kept under wraps. Giamma can't help but feel that his classmates can be so carefree because he stopped the mermaid. After he was initially discharged, the first thing he did was to visit the school's forge to reshape and enhance Murasame. The sword was just a metal rod to him at the moment considering the sword god's blessing, so reforging it is a must. He went to meet the blacksmith Volunder. Now he can only hope for a successful enhancement. As he thinks through the recent events, he hears Chloe call out his name. He turns to see her walking towards him in crutches while her leg is in a cast. Thanks to Speed Weapon's emergency treatment, the doctor said that she will be able to walk without crutches within a week. Despite her injuries, it looks like she's doing much better. Even if Giamma did take down the mermaid alone, it was thanks to everyone's efforts that they all came out of that situation alive. Chloe's rescue call, Rachel's merman clearing, and Speed's healing and blessings all played a part in that battle. The only person who didn't play a decent role would be Leon. Giamma can't help but wonder if he is going to be able to defeat the Demon King with a fighting spirit like that. Maybe it's because he got injured first or something. Their chat is interrupted when their instructor barges into the class and orders everyone to sit down and pay attention to a few announcements before the training assembly. Once all the students are in their seats, he informs them that there will be someone co-instructing them. The students are initially annoyed by this sudden change until they see just who will be instructing them. Siegfried calmly walks into the class much to the astonishment of the entire class as Li Wanbin bows to him in respect. Even Giamma can't hold back his shock at seeing the strongest human coming to his class. Meanwhile, elsewhere, an old man is thrown against a wall before being grabbed by the scruff of his neck and held up the wall. A pink-haired woman slaps the old man across the face, sending him flying to the ground. He apologizes to the woman named Instructor Kim while she struggles to control her breathing. This woman that is mercilessly beating up this man is the 5th Demon Corps commander, and she is not pleased at all. She asks him why he didn't cooperate with her when he had the chance, and the man tries to apologize, but that only gets him another smack to the face. It's clear that the purple-haired instructor is tired of apologies. The goal of this whole scheme was to bring Leon back from the exams half dead. He may be a hero candidate, but there's no way he could take out a mermaid alone. But now, because of the old man's incompetence, Leon is now comfortable at the academy. Instructor Kim gives the elder another kick to the face, but immediately regrets it when she sees that she got blood on her shoes. She still can't believe that a full demonoid was taken down by a bunch of first years, but looking at the new students that joined the academy this year, she can't say that she is surprised. The elder speaks up and clarifies that taking on the mermaid was done by just one cadet. Instructor Kim first thinks he's talking about Leon, but he clarifies that it's the academy's top student, Kang Jiyama. The Demon Corps commander recognizes the name of the special admissions student, and that tells her everything she needs to know. It looks like there's new prey for her to hunt now. The prey in question, though, isn't the most efficient person to hunt. Wolf class once again goes on their daily training with the exception of Chloe, who is still in a cast and crutches. Jiyama can't help being jealous of her getting to rest, and he's forced to run for his life with his fellow students. And to make it worse, there's now an older man breathing down his neck after every lap, and he's surprisingly fast and nimble for his age. Siegfried runs up close to Jiyama and urges him to run faster, even thinking that he might still be hurt from the midterms. It's weird for the Sword Emperor himself to be running around with first-year students, much less with a special admission student. Siegfried von Nibelung is a man that will later inherit the title of Sword Saint and become one of the greatest forces of humanity. Not only that, but during the Second Demon War, he will also become Leon's swordsmanship master, and he's a character whose importance rapidly increases in the latter half of the story. So why is someone who's this important training with Wolf class? The main story has clearly started to go off track, and now it's pretty much falling apart. Come to think of it, Leon never ended up receiving the Sword Saint title, and that ended up being a pretty big issue in his past life. But Leon can't inherit the Sword Saint family because he's not part of the Nibelung bloodline, so it doesn't matter. That doesn't make this situation any less uncomfortable for Jiyama though, especially considering the jealous glares his classmates keep shooting him. With how close Siegfried is to Jiyama, it almost looks like they are running together. Siegfried also takes moments to try and educate Jiyama, telling him that the foundation of any warrior comes from their physical strength and endurance. No matter how talented or outstanding someone is, it's completely worthless if their body cannot support it. Once he gets Jiyama motivated, he runs ahead, expecting his student to keep up with him. After their running laps are done, it's time for field training. For this training, personal weapons are strictly prohibited. Instead, the students will have to use one of the weapons provided by the school and learn to master it. Siegfried dumps a variety of different weapons on the ground. He notices that there is even a sashimi knife among the pile. The rest of the students are surprised by this sudden condition that their teacher has given them. One of them asks why it wouldn't be better to just use the weapons passed down by their families. That's because the basics are more important than anything else. The more a person relies on high-grade weapons, the more they will start to neglect their training, and it's easy to mistake the power of a weapon for one's own strength. At the end of the day, a master can never blame their equipment. Those words resonate with Jiyama specifically, and he nods his head in agreement. With no more room for idle chit-chat, the Sword Emperor tells the student to pick up the weapons and master the basics with them. Cadets who can handle ordinary weapons skillfully also have a high probability of receiving a high score in the class, which will affect their promotion evaluation at the end of the year. That additional bit of information gets the rest of the students excited, and they rush to pick up any weapon they can find. Jiyama naturally goes towards the sashimi knife, laying unnoticed on the floor. As soon as he picks it up, he notices Siegfried's eyes watching him. The students gather together again after picking up their weapons, and Siegfried tells them that they will spend the day getting accustomed to their new weapons by performing one-on-one training between the cadets without a subspace. To make sure that the students don't go overboard with their training, Siegfried suggests that he gives a demonstration of proper sparring. Li Wanbin prepares himself to spar against the Sword Emperor, but him shivering in fear makes it obvious that he's not prepared for this. In his whole life, this has to be the biggest crisis he has ever faced. However, Siegfried has a different idea in mind. He calls for Jiyama to come forward for the spar. Siegfried is also holding one of the novice weapons from the pile of old tools, but in his hands, the piece of junk looks especially sharp. The other students are still jealous and confused by the fact that the Sword Emperor himself is calling Jiyama out personally. Jiyama comes out, and before they start, he asks Jiyama if his bones have healed. Once he gets a positive answer, he tells our MC to pick up his sword. This is just a sparring match, but Jiyama thinks that this is way too much. If he crosses swords with the Sword Emperor, it's clear that this won't end easily. If this gets out of hand, at least one of them will lose a hand, and if they are unlucky, then even a head will roll. Despite those thoughts though, maybe because of the influence of divine power, his instincts are craving for a fight. Gyama tries to de-escalate the situation and says that he's nothing compared to the Sword Emperor, so Siegfried should lower his sword. The rest of his classmates mock him behind his back, making fun of the fact that he's chickening out of a fight. Siegfried also isn't impressed, and calls Gyama out for continuing to hide his power and his pride as a swordsman. There's no reason for Gyama to have such extraordinary talent while living as a cowardly person. Pride is a word that Gyama had engraved in his heart, ever since he claimed the title of the greatest swordsman in the country. Those characteristics are also the reason why he never put down his sword. The provocation from the Sword Emperor is supposed to test him, and if he falls for the provokation in this situation, then he will definitely end up regretting it for a long time. Still, he can't ignore his pride as a swordsman and his urge to fight. Li Wanbin notices Gyama's change in demeanor and rushes to stop what's about to happen, but Siegfried stops him. It seems like Gyama has already made up his mind. Gyama pulls out the sashimi knife from its cover and prepares for a fight. The two of them stare each other down for a moment, and even at 70, Siegfried can recognize vividly the enlightenment he gained through the sword. When he was younger, he had memories of a one-armed, wandering knight teaching him the way of the sword. The swordsmanship that the knight showed him was undoubtedly at the level of a certain realm. And now, the boy that he has been keeping an eye on since the allocation test, Kang Gyama, might be the person that will lead him to that realm. Gyama takes the initiative and charges as Siegfried, but the swordmaster is ready and greets him with a slash of his sword. Gyama is quick enough to dodge and then turn around for another strike, causing Siegfried to deflect with his sword, and the two clash again. The boldness of Gyama to charge in head-on without avoiding the strike is almost inspiring to Siegfried. As the two of them continue to fight, Siegfried notices that even Gyama's physical capabilities have increased a lot. He can even push the Sword Emperor back so effortlessly. However, his sword isn't light either, and Siegfried is determined not to take this match lightly. Meanwhile, the other students watch the two of them fight, but they can't tell what's going on. From what they can tell, Gyama just got lucky during the matchup in the last subspace sparring with Nox. And yet, even the Sword Emperor seems to care a lot about Gyama, who is just a special admission student. They at least hope that the Sword Emperor will give him a proper lesson that will leave him crying. And yet, after several minutes of watching, the two of them are just standing there, staring at each other. Li Wanbin knows what's really happening though. They aren't just standing still. They have reached a level that the Wolf class instructor doubted was even possible. Before the spar, he warned Siegfried that if the headmaster found out about this, then things might get out of hand. On top of that, the other cadets could also be affected, but Siegfried assured him that he has no intentions of crossing real swords with Gyama. The older man already knows that our MC has the power to cross into a special place. The place is called the Mental Realm. To enter this place and withstand a battle with Siegfried, Gyama must be on an entirely different level than they even gave him credit for. A duel in the mental realm is an intense battle of wits, and Siegfried can tell just from the short time they have crossed swords that Gyama is growing at an impressive rate. If that's the case, the Sword Emperor might have to take things to another level as well. He activates a powerful blessing called the Sword Spirit Protection, and even outside the mental realm, the students can feel the intense pressure coming from the two of them. The blue light coming from Siegfried's sword is definitely some sort of aura. It looks like the battle was so intense that the two of them broke out of the mental realm and returned to reality. Things are starting to get out of hand, and if Li Wanbin doesn't do something to stop this, then there will definitely be bloodshed. Before he can stop them though, Gyama and Siegfried take off and launch at each other, but a loud cry stops them both in their tracks. Medea arrives before they can cross swords again. An appearance causes the ground beneath her to break apart with her anger. The fight ends, and Siegfried is taken back to Medea's office for a proper scolding. He apologizes, but the headmaster is clearly not taking any weak words from him. She yells at him for going way too crazy and trying to pick a fight with a student after she went through so much trouble to get him a spot as an instructor in the school. In that moment, Siegfried lost his self-control and exerted his aura to the fullest. He would probably have gotten an even greater scolding, but as soon as Medea arrived and de-escalated the situation, he turned around to her and apologized. In over 50 years that they have known each other, Medea has never heard him say sorry, and yet he said that today not just once, but twice. That's the only reason she's calmly trying to listen to him right now. She directly asks him why he would unleash the Sword Spirit's blessing on a student. If Medea hadn't arrived when she didn't, things would have gotten deadly. Siegfried tells her that if he hadn't released the blessing, then he wouldn't have been able to gain the upper hand against Gayama. That stops Medea in her tracks. For someone with as much pride as Siegfried to admit that, things must be truly incomprehensible. She knows about the innate talent of Kang Jeoma, but she also knows better than anyone just how strong Siegfried truly is. Then he reveals that Jeoma has already reached the mental realm. Siegfried, for comparison, only managed to master it at the age of nearly 30. The fact that a 17-year-old has done it is more than Medea can believe. Siegfried doesn't know either, but there's no denying what he experienced. All this new information is way too much for Medea to understand, but she remembered what she saw after she stopped the fight and went to check on Jeoma. The moment she ran up to him, any semblance of dignity as an educator or one of the 7 stars vanished. In that moment, the only emotion she felt towards Jeoma was fear. A fear similar to the feeling she had when she met the 6th Division commander, Vaesun. She can't figure out why she would have such an eerie feeling towards one of her own students, but it does give more credibility to the crazy things Siegfried is telling her. She then asks Siegfried directly if he lost, and the normally calm and quiet man becomes irate in a second. He yells that even if Jeoma's talent is innate, there's no way that it would compare to his. And on top of that, he even says that he wasn't fully armed at the time, which is the reason why things went the way they did. Medea calls him out for breaking his own rule of blaming his equipment. And can equipment really be an excuse when facing off against a student? The way he's overreacting just makes him look ridiculous. Her words make him so angry that he tries to activate the sword spirit's blessing right there, but a firm slap from Medea pulls him out of it. Elsewhere, Jeoma wakes up from a dream where he relived the fight with Siegfried. Everything ended well, but the Sword Emperor is quite hot-headed. If Medea hadn't intervened, things could have gotten really dangerous. The mental realm is also a really strange thing to experience. The mental realm is only achieved when one grasps full mastery and understanding of their weapon. It's an active space that can be activated when certain conditions are met, and only peak masters who have honed a single weapon for their entire lives can enter it. Because of this, even in the World Miracles Blessing game, not even 10 heroes can freely enter the mental realm. Leon, the protagonist, blessed with the qualities of a hero, needed 3 years of private training just to set foot in it. That's the point where Jeoma stopped playing. However, Jeoma managed to do it right away. Maybe it's because of his sashimi knife. Including his previous life, he has been using the sashimi knife for more than 20 years. What's more, every time he unleashed the sword spirit's blessing, he would experience a concentration that transcends perception. The tangled web between the life he's living here and his past life start to intertwine, breaking through situations. Based on his experiences so far, avoiding situations only makes things worse. Rather than being swept along passively, it'd be better to tackle what he can do and solve things step by step. Now that he can freely control the mental realm, he can probably try to train in combat without relying on the sword god's blessing. He stands up from the bed and slowly uncovers his sashimi knife. Then, after a little bit of concentration, he re-enters the mental realm. Then in an instant, the realm shatters, and a large hand reaches in through the void towards him. It stretches down, and a single finger touches Jeoma's shoulder, snapping him out of his trance, and filling the hand holding the knife with aura. Whatever it is though, it's too much for the knife, and the weapon disintegrates. Elsewhere, some elders argue among themselves in a dimly lit room. The old man from before that was talking to the Demon Corps commander, argues with the rest of the Academy's elders. The main thing he's trying to do is convince the rest of the elders to investigate Jeoma on suspicion that he might be a candidate for the hero. The rest of the elders don't agree, since it's already well known that the hero candidate is Leon. The elder tries to make the argument that Leon is still half-baked, and can't even properly manifest his blessing, while Jeoma has very obvious capabilities that were first shown when he took down the Genius Twins during the class placement exam. What's more, Medea is also blocking information about him under the pretense of protecting the student. Everything about him is just way too suspicious, and it means that they have to investigate. He also reminds them that the 7 stars have been meddling way too much in their affairs, and since Medea, who is one of the 7 stars, became the Academy director, their standing as elders has been severely weakened. After Basman was defeated, the public only looked at the 7 stars while treating the elders like outdated relics. If a hero were to appear, then that would shift their reputation even more. The other elders agree with that and also feel like they need some sort of public enemy if they want to maintain their power. They unanimously agree that the hero that threatens the Demon King must be eliminated. The man became an elder of the Academy because of the purple-haired instructor, and that's why he's putting so much effort into persuading the elders through sheer force. If he doesn't do something here, then Air Acor, the 5th Demon King Division commander, will definitely make him wish he were dead. After some more persuasion, the elders finally agree with the verdict that Kang Jiyama needs to be investigated and eliminated, and for that, they need to issue orders to the Adatore family. That isn't the only problem on Jiyama's plate though. Right now he's staring at the blacksmith that he trusted to take care of his weapon as the man backs away in fear. Despite his hopes of using the murasame as an alternative to sashimi knives, somehow, Volunder managed to turn his only hope of escaping the sword god's blessing into a sashimi knife. And if that wasn't bad enough, the sword has also been reduced to an E rank weapon from a B rank. Even Volunder is confused, and in the 30 years that he has been smelting weapons, he has never seen something like this happen before. What happened was, when he tried to work on the sword, it's as if it refused to be forged. He hastily melted the metal and reforged it, but he barely managed to give it a proper shape. If any ordinary blacksmith had tried to do this, they would have ended up with a useless lump of metal. Even with Jiyama's 20 years of experience with knives, he can tell that the craftsmanship is impressive, and the specifications also align plenty with the sword god's blessing, but the hardness is still E rank.